Hello, and welcome back to another video. This is the 15th episode of story in which the 4th Shinobi World War was over, and Naruto was finally captured by Madara. But is hope truly gone? And what the heck is happening to the Ghetto Mazo? Join our favorite blonde hero and the nine-tailed beasts on their great journey to the past. Let's see how Naruto deals with this. After you've finished watching, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. To begin, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let's get this show going. Never before had Sunagakure been in such a mobilization. Ninja of all ranks, all ages were running around, positioning themselves at different places around the village under their superior's command, gathering whatever weapons they had, or even comforting the younger ones who hadn't had much fighting experience. No one could even crack a smile. They all knew that if they couldn't do it, it would be the end of one of the greatest hidden villages of the shinobi world. Kaze Kage-sama. Gaara didn't look at the shinobi who had just landed at his right. His eyes were all deeply focused on the horizon, at the direction the invaders were coming from. "Report," he said. "Our scouts have just reported. They said that even though they had searched everywhere, there was no sign of anything moving in a radius of 10 kilometers around the village. So maybe you were just mistaken?" Tamari asked hopefully. Kankuro, standing next to her, shook his head. "No. Gaara's sound movement sensor is never wrong, and such a large force could not be something he imagined out. If there is nothing visible, then the only explanation possible is that they are moving underground." Tamari blinked. "But isn't moving something as large as that army underground kinda impossible? I mean, you know that moving underground for such a long time under this desert is impossible even for one person, right? And yet they are moving a whole 10,000 troop army." "I don't know," Gaara answered. "And that's what makes them dangerous. Moving the army underground leaves us with no way to know what formation they are in, what level of ninja they have, what kinds of war equipment they are using. Meaning, we, as the defenders, don't know anything about them, while they have more than enough in both element of surprise and number against us. So basically, we are like cornered rats, right?" "Basically, yes." Silence for a few seconds. Then Tamari asked, "So what are we going to do?" Gaara closed his eyes. 2 seconds later, his eyes snapped open, and he commanded. "Tamari, you are one of the shinobi with the most powerful long-range jutsu in the village. Gather more long-range fighters with decent wind and fire jutsu and go up the west side of the wall and wait for my command to fire. Kankuro, you go get Elder Chio together with 5 jonin and bring them to the shelter. You will be in charge of protection there." "What?" the puppeteer protested. "I can't do that. I want to fight with you in the front line." Gaara turned around and looked at his brother with a sharp glare. Kankuro flinched. I'm sorry, Gaara, I didn't mean to." "Kankuro." The puppeteer blinked when he heard Gaara's voice. There was no sign of anger or anything in his tone. "As Kaze Kage, the first duty I have to fulfill is to provide safety for the citizens. With almost every shinobi of the village at the front line, our force to protect them would be thinned down. And you already know what our enemies can do. Protecting the citizens is the job I cannot entrust to anyone else except the ones I trust the most. You, my brother." Kankuro was stunned for a while. Then, he nodded. "Understood. I will do what I was told." And he turned and leapt away, but not before saying, "Be careful, Gaara." When his siblings had already been away, Gaara said in his mind, "Shukaku? Are you ready for the battle?" "Humph. Way ahead of you." The beast inside him answered. "I'm itching to show those Akatsuki how not to mess with me." "All right, then." Chakra started flowing out of his body, into the sand under him and in the radius of 500 meters around the village. "Let's see if you have what it takes to get past this or not." Naruto, together with the other members of Team 7 and Team 8, was standing in front of the huge gate leading out of Konoha, ready to depart. "All right, let's review the mission we have," Kakashi announced. "Team 7. First, what we need to do is to get to Sunagakure as quickly as possible. Then, with everything we have, assist them in their resistance. Is that clear enough?" "Very clear, Sensei," Sakura answered. "But how can we get there fast enough? I mean, it's already been a day since Suna noticed the sudden attack, and if the words of that weasel were right, it should take at least that much time to get to Suna from here, right?" Naruto raised his hand. "I think I can use my Flying Thunder God Jutsu to get all of us there, but only if we're in range. My skill with the jutsu is nowhere near that of my dad. Oh, and by the way, I think you guys should have this." He pulled out 7 Flying Thunder God kunai from his pouch. "If you keep this with you, I can come to your aid at any time providing that you are in my range. I also gave one to Gaara at the time we stayed in Sunagakure during our training trip, so. I already gave these to Gigi and other people in the Konoha 15 too, he added when Kurenai raised an eyebrow at him. Each person stepped up and took a kunai from Naruto's hand. Kakashi continued. Team 8. Kurenai, you know what you guys have to do already, right? The Genjutsu mistress nodded. Yes. We will go with Tatsumaki to rescue Baki-san, and after that, we will continue to provide assistance by sabotaging the formation of the enemies behind their back, if possible. Please depart quickly. On her shoulder, the small weasel exclaimed. When I parted with Baki-sama, he was already very weak. If you don't hurry up, he might die before you can even arrive. Then we're going now, Kakashi, Kurenai nodded, stroking the head of the weasel, making her wince in annoyance. Naruto looked at Hinata, who was tightening up her backpack on her shoulders, ready to depart. Be careful, alright, Hinata-chan? Hinata turned back and gave him a smile. Don't worry, Naruto-kun. I'll show you why I'm not the weak Hinata you used to know. Naruto grinned back at her. I never thought of you as weak, believe it. Kurenai nodded at her students, and the 4 shinobi disappeared with body flickers. Kakashi turned back to his own team. Alright, come back to our problem. Sasuke? The Uchiha smirked. I thought you didn't have to ask. Summoning jutsu. A huge cloud of smoke filled the air, and when it dissipated, Naruto gasped. No way. Appeared from the smoke were 2 huge hawks. One of them had dark red feather while the other one had yellowish-brown, colors which were both quite unusual for hawks in general. Just a stretch of their wings made wind sweeping through the clearing. Seeing Naruto's gaping mouth, Sasuke smirked. You don't have to be so surprised. But yes, Naruto. You are looking at the newest summoner of the Hawk Kingdom. Hawk? Kingdom? Naruto blinked when he heard the tailed beast's exclamation in his head. What's wrong, guys? Does that Hawk Kingdom have something wrong with it? It's not surprised you don't know about it. Surprisingly, it was Shukaku who said. The hawk, the lion and the dragon are the 3 summoned creatures known as the triumvirate of summons. They are in a whole different level comparing to the toad, the snake and the slug. Getting them as summons isn't simply signing their summoning contract. Anyone who wants to has to go through extremely difficult and dangerous trials in order to just reach where they live, and even after that they might flat out refuse to form the contract, and even kill the wannabe summoner if they deem them unworthy. That's why in the history of humankind there are very few humans who manage to get them as their personal summon, and even fewer who could summon the 3 kings of the triumvirate. Even us tailed beasts have to respect them. The piece of information from Shukaku made Naruto's brain numb from surprise and shock. Wow. Yeah, Kurama added. That's why I was so shocked seeing him summon a hawk during the war. That Uchiha always seems to be able to pull things out of his ass whenever he wants to. Seeing Naruto's face, Sasuke smirked. If you feel that to be surprising, then I am not even the strangest one in Konoha when it comes to personal summon. He looked at Sakura. Sakura here is the only one in the whole village to be able to sign summoning contracts with 2 different summoning creatures. Right now, she is having medical training with Tsunade-sama and the slug, but her combat prowess is mostly from the teaching of the wolf tribe. Well, at least this time he's not the one with 2 summoning contracts. That would just be stupid, Isabu snarked inside Naruto's head. So basically I'm the worst when it comes to summoning jutsu in this team, huh? Naruto muttered. Kakashi sighed, and bopped him over his head. If you say that, then what am I, chopped liver? Now come on, we have an urgent mission to go on here. Sasuke? The Uchiha walked up to the 2 giant hawks. Ulki, Janaf, I'm sorry for summoning you for something like this, but we need to go to Sunagakure as quickly as possible. Can you 2 help us getting there? Konoha and Suna will treasure your help a lot. The Red Hawk glared at his summoner. You haven't summoned us for quite a long time already, and the first thing you do is making us carry other humans? You're so dead after this, Sasuke Uchiha. Don't ever think that just because you are favored by the king. Look, can you please help us? Sasuke said patiently. The fate of Sunagakure, our ally, is lying in your wings right now, so if you can help us. The hawks glared at him imperiously for a moment. Then, they nodded. Alright, but just this time only, understand? Everyone's faces brightened. Thank you very much. After the 4 shinobi had settled themselves comfortably on the 2 hawks, Sasuke and Naruto on Janaf's back, and Kakashi and Sakura on Ulki's, Kakashi said. Alright, let's go. Team 7, move out. Utter silence covered Sunagakure. Completely contrasting the scene just 1 hour ago, No shinobi of Sunagakure could even move a single muscle at the moment. Their bodies were all tensed up, ready for the command which could be coming from their Kazekage any moment. When that command was uttered, it would be war. There wouldn't be any other way for them to leave. But it's not like they were going to leave anyway. Their duty was, after all, protecting the village until the very last of their blood. Their chakra was exhausted. Almost there. Sweats rolled down the cheeks of the shinobi, dropping down the sand under their feet. The ground started shaking slightly. Ready. The tremor was getting closer. And then, it abruptly stopped. The vanguard of the invaders trying to sneak into the village underground were disintegrated upon touching the wall of chakra Gaara sent down there. And it seemed the ones following them immediately learned their lesson, because right after that, the desert exploded, and hundreds after hundreds of white, slimy humanoid creatures emerged and launched themselves at the walls of the village. On cue, the shinobi on the wall went through the same technique at the same time. Wind style, wind scythe jutsu. The tornado created by the collaboration jutsu tore apart the whole wave of the invaders like paper. But that definitely wasn't the only thing they had. When the tornado died down, many more similar creatures burst out from the desert ground and swarmed towards the village. Hold your position. Don't let even one of them get into the village. The invasion had begun. Ameno Shirogane was just a normal Genin of Sunagakure. His clan wasn't something great or famous, they didn't have any powerful Kake Genkai or special jutsu, what they had was just normal puppet jutsu which a lot of Suna shinobi could use. And most shinobi of his clan were born after the Third Great War. They neither understood how terrifying wars were nor experienced battles in such a large scale. Ameno himself hadn't even killed anyone before. Therefore, being thrown into a war so suddenly, of course he couldn't help trembling in fear facing a whole army of strange white slimy humanoid creatures charging at him, even with all the comrades standing beside him. One of the white Zetsu, seeing his hesitation, rushed in with its right arm raising, spikes made of the same white substance forming its body protruded from the arm, and it lashed out at the boy. Trembling in fear, the Genin could only widen his eyes in shock when the spikes were coming toward his exposed stomach. Splurred. But luckily for him, before the attack could land, the creature had been torn apart by a blade of wind coming from his sensei. Tamari landed in front of him, her eyes, instead of showing disappointment at him, only had a worried look. "Are you alright, Ameno?" He looked at his sensei, his eyes were still wide in fear. "Why yeah, I think." Tamari turned her body, right in time to avoid a strike from another white Zetsu and smashed its head open with her fan. She said without looking back at her student. "Ameno, right now as your superior, I forbid you to freeze up like that. I know you are not someone who is familiar with killing, but right now, that matter is something you must put aside. We are at war now, and each of us here is one more glimpse of hope for this village. And times like this are times we cannot afford to lose hope." Then she glanced at him with a smile. "You are one of the most promising Genin of this village, and my student. Even if we are just nameless people in this world, we are still the sons and daughters of this village. Show me that my hope for you isn't a waste, and stand up by yourself and protect the village with me, as a shinobi of Sunagakure." The boy was stunned for a few seconds. Then, he stood up and unraveled the puppet he was carrying on his back since the beginning of the battle. It landed on the ground with a clack. "Yes, sensei. I will protect the village." War wasn't anything new to Sasaki Shigura. As a veteran Jonin of Sunagakure, he had survived through the terror of the Third Great Shinobi World War, and as such, he understood well what was waiting for him when he threw himself into battle. Before a war, leaders can say everything about unity, friendship, honor, love, about stopping bad things from spreading, basically, any nice, pretty lies just to rally the spirit of soldiers. But when they are already in battle, there is nothing else to think about but killing. Either you kill, or you will be killed. That's the nature of war. There is nothing glorious about war at all, and anyone who insists so is just lying to themselves. And ironically, that's also the very same reason why soldiers fight. They know if they don't, their loved ones will suffer the consequence of the war, losing their freedom, their possession, even their lives. And they are pushed into the fight with the goal of stopping things like that from happening. That was what every shinobi of Sunagakure, including Sasaki himself, kept in their mind when they voluntarily plunged themselves into the heat of this war. This was their village, and it's their duty to protect it together with their loved ones from the terrifying fate that would definitely come if they didn't. Right now, Sasaki was facing a group of 5 white Zetsus by himself. From the direction they were running towards, it seemed they were aiming for the other part of the village, where the shelter of the villagers was at. "You bastards are not going to get through me," he bellowed, and sent a wave of shuriken from his hands towards the invaders. A few of the ninja stars managed to take down one of the white zetsus, but the others were deflected rather easily by the mutated abominations. But everything was within his calculation. He brought his hands down, and the deflected shuriken abruptly changed their course and flew around the white zetsus, tying them up with the steel ninja wires attached to them. "Die!" Sasaki yelled, and brought his hands together. The razor-sharp metal wires constricted, and cut the tied creatures to shred. The Jonin let out a deep breath, and pulled out 2 kunai from his weapon pouch and pointed them at another group of white zetsus, which was coming toward him. "Just come here, you bastards. No matter how many of you there are, as long as I can stand, none of you can get through here. For Sunagakure." And with that final roar, he charged. Gaara sent a wave of sand forward, which collapsed on a bunch of white zetsus and crushed them into pulps. These things look monstrous, but they don't seem to be that dangerous on their own. And their number. I can still sense their presence, but this makes no sense. Why are such a large proportion of them that far away from the village? It could be a trick, Shukaku said in his head. Or maybe they're too scared of me. Ha ha ha. No. It can't be. Unless. Gaara looked up, and saw something on the sky. It looked like a bird. No, it was way bigger than a normal bird, even things like birds of prey. It looked like a winged dragon. From its mouth, some small things were spat out and fell down the battlefield below. Art. Is a blast. Oh shit. Gaara immediately launched his hands upward, and bullets made of sand shot out from the ground to intercept the incoming projectiles. And fortunately for Sunagakure that he did that, because right upon contact, the deadly projectiles exploded violently, sending many shinobi fighting nearby on their butts. Taking the chance the resistance fighters were temporarily taken aback, the White Zetsu army advanced, and managed to take some shinobi out of the battle. "Temari. Take care of things down here, I will engage that airborne enemy," Gaara yelled at his sister, and a cloud of sand rose up from the ground, carrying him to the sky where the bombs were coming from. On the way, he shot out more sand bullets to stop other bombs which were raining down the head of other Suna shinobi. More explosions filled the air. "Kaze Kage, yeah." Deidara cackled when he saw Gaara floating up to where he was flying at. "What an honor to get you up here with me, yeah." Gaara stared at him impassively. "Why don't you go down there and we will talk?" Deidara laughed. "What? Do you think I'm that stupid, yeah? Why should I go down there to give you the advantage?" Gaara cut in. "Look down." "Huh?" Suddenly being interrupted, Deidara could only blink in confusion. Then he felt himself lurching upward when a giant fist made of sand shot upward from the ground and sucker punched his dragon in the stomach. The force of the punch destroyed the dragon made of clay instantly, and Deidara had to hastily make a bird from clay to land himself on in mid-air. He snarled. "How dare you? When I say go down, you are going down." Gaara had appeared behind Deidara on his sand cloud since God knows when. Then, he did something even the craziest person couldn't even think about. He bonked the mad bomber over the head with his gourd. His 50-kilo heavy gourd full of sand. Temari winced when the meteorite that was Deidara's body hurtled down the sky into the Kazekage's tower. "Ouch. That had to hurt," she muttered while swinging her fan to decapitate another white zetsu. "Are you sure that he's this way?" Kurenai asked the small weasel, who was standing comfortably on her shoulder. The little critter nodded. "Of course I'm sure. I had to leave him right." The group landed at the base of a tree. "Here." The weasel pointed, and gasped. "No. It couldn't be." She teared up upon seeing all the blood on the bark of the tree. "Are we too late?" Shino, still as calm as ever, asked. Tatsumaki wailed. "No. Wee! It can't be." "Wait." Kiba suddenly said. "I can still catch the smell of someone with the same scent of blood on his body near here. The scent is still new and fresh, there might still be a chance he is alive." Kurenai immediately looked at Hinata. "He couldn't be very far away from here." "Check immediately, Hinata." The Hyuga girl nodded. "Yes, sensei." "Byakugan." Veins popped out at the corner of Hinata's eyes. "Yes, I saw him. A man wearing the Sunagakure flak jacket and Hittite is about a kilometers to the north of this place, but he is losing a lot of blood, and his chakra is wavering out. Also, about 50 meters away from him was a band of some strange white humanoid creatures. If we go full speed now we can still save him," Kiba said urgently, and Kurenai nodded. "All right. Teammate, let's move out." Baka let out a deep, heavy sigh. He had managed to avoid the enemies hunting him for a while. But even he could see that he could not run away forever. A few hours had passed, The wound he had managed to close up crudely by some stitches were opening up again, and he had already taken 2 blood pills. 3 was the limit he could take for a day, 1 more and he wouldn't be able to do anything until he bled out. The fact that he had crossed the whole land of wind to get to this part of the land of fire in just 1 day, on foot, was already an incredible achievement. Usually, it would take at least 3 days to get to Konoha from Suna, and yet he managed to do that in just 1 day, through the front line of the enemies to boot. He sighed again. If only he had taken the medical lessons seriously. His chakra was also running out. He had managed to take out some of the enemies, but he knew he could not use big jutsus without alerting their whole company. His only chance was to snipe them from afar with weapons boosted by wind chakra. He had tried it against a single lost white Zetsu, and it proved that even though they looked like monstrous plants shaped like human, they could still be killed if their head was taken off. He checked inside his pouch. 10 shuriken and 5 kunai, and a few explosive tags. If he planned it right, he could take out at least 50 enemies with them. The question is, does he have the chance? Deidara had managed to dig himself out of the debris of the collapsed tower. "Ugh, I think I got a concussion there, yeah." He groaned, holding his head. "And it will get even worse after this." In front of him, the cold, raspy voice of Gaara rose. "Sand coffin. Well shit." Deidara cursed when sand started creeping up on his legs. He'd already heard about the way of fighting of the young Kazekage, if he got caught up in this. Water style, water shark bomb. A missile shaped like a shark swept through the field, aiming at Gaara, forcing him to jump away to avoid being hit. The water also managed to clear Gaara's sand, which wasn't the kind the Kazekage tended to use infused thoroughly with his chakra, away from Deidara's body. Kisame landed on the ground in front of the mad bomber, brandishing Saimata. "I already told you this Kazekage brat is not that easy to play with." Gaara's eyes narrowed. "That sword. You are Kisame Hoshigaki, am I correct? So the Akatsuki is now in action." Such an honor to be realized by the Kazekage himself, the Sharkman gave a nasty grin in answer. "I will assist you, Gaara," Tamari yelled, jumping toward her brother, but Gaara's command immediately stunned her in place. "No, Tamari. Leave these 2 to me. Go and assist Kankuro at the shelter. These people. They didn't come here alone. This Kazekage is kinda sharp, yeah?" Deidara sneered. "But I'm afraid. When she manages to arrive there, Sasori Dana has already finished everything, yeah. Alright, everyone. Gaara has entrusted this mission to us. Since there is no one else who can do this except for us, we have to protect the shelter and everyone inside it as long as we can. Am I clear?" "Sir, yes, sir." "Alright, then. Now, get to your assigned position, and prepare anything necessary that you can do to stop the enemies from going through. Remember, they can get through by going underground, so watch out under your feet." After the shinobi had separated to work on reinforcing the defense of the shelter, Kankuro looked around. He couldn't find Lady Chio anywhere, but this would have to do. And he couldn't understand why, but for some reason he had been feeling uneasy since they arrived at the place. It was just like someone was watching and tailing them here. But with a sudden movement, he pulled out a kunai covered in explosive tags and threw it at a building nearby. The kunai exploded violently, bringing down the building into a heap of debris. "You can come out now. Don't think I didn't notice you." From the inside, a shadow leapt out. Its tail lashed out, aiming at Kankuro's head. But the Suna puppeteer had prepared for it. A flick of his hand sent his puppet crow, which had been unsealed from its scroll before the defense started and was now lying on his back, out to block the attack before it could touch him. Only now did Kankuro realize what had just been going to attack him. It was a very large puppet, wearing a mask with a tail like a scorpion. From inside the puppet, a voice rose. "Oh? You're actually quite good for such a youngster." Taking the chance, Kankuro swiped his hand back, and his puppet detached itself from the enemy and rushed it once again. But to his horror, a whip of the enemy puppet's tail was more than enough to send Crow flying. "Don't bother using something like this against me," the voice of the puppet continued mocking. "I am the one who created this crow of yours, of course I know everything about it. You can't even touch me with this level of puppet jutsu." Kankuro's eyes widened. "Creator of crow? Then you are. You." Gaara snarled. This was the first time for a long time that he'd lost his calm like this. "Leave the civilians alone, they don't have anything to do with this." "Ha," Deidara laughed at him. "Do you really think you are in a position to say things like that? You can just keep that honorable attitude, but this is a war, and in a war, anything is fine. You bastards. Chakra suddenly exploded from Gaara's body. Temari, standing next to him, was nearly thrown off her feet from the chakra whipping at her. It was so terrifying. Even before, when Gaara had still been a psychopathic killer, she had never seen him this angry. Oh? Kisame raised an eyebrow. It seems the Jinchuriki is angry because we threatened its village. Before we start, I want to confirm something. Gaara's voice rose, cold and threatening. Are you the Akatsuki, and are you here to capture me and crush this village? Deidara laughed. And what if it's true? Then I won't have to regret anything if I do this. As he finished the sentence, the gourd on his back exploded into a very big, thick cloud of sand. And this was definitely not the kind of sand he had been using since the beginning of the battle. This was the sand deeply infused with the chakra of both Gaara himself and Shikaku for a very long time, way more powerful and potent than the normal sand of the desert. The sand curled up around the Kazekage like a dragon, lifting him up from the ground. Now you are going to know why people feared the name Gaara of the Sand when I was still a child, he said, his cold voice echoed through the air. Himiko Sakuraba was scared. It was not like she wasn't a good ninja. In fact, among the newly graduated students from the academy, she was one of the best. Ninjutsu, Daijutsu, Genjutsu, she was the ace in everything. After graduation, everything she wanted was to be able to participate in a war. Her dream was to become the best kunoichi in the world, surpassing even Tsunade of the Sannin, to become a war hero even more famous than the Sannin herself. But now, when she was suddenly thrown into a real war, everything was in total chaos. The only things she could hear around her were screams and the sound of blades cutting into flesh. The disgusting odor of blood overwhelmed her senses, making her feel like vomiting, and it became even worse knowing that the blood was from her comrades. Her hands trembled like crazy. War was no way near what she had imagined. Everything she had heard before about wars had only been a big lie. There was absolutely no pride, no honor, no justice, nothing good in it at all. The only thing that existed in a war was bloody carnage, and after that, the pain of losing people close to her. For the first time, Himiko Sakuraba, the ace student of Sunagakure Shinobi Academy, the most promising shinin of the village, who everyone considered a genius of her generation, just wanted to abandon everything and run away. A white Zetsu, seeing her alone, leapt at her, its arm morphed into a thing full of sharp spikes, aiming at her head. Himiko's eyes widened, she brought the hand holding her kunai up, and unconsciously pumped chakra into it. Splurt. Her eyes followed the white, slimy body as it fell to the ground, its eyes bugged out of their sockets in a horrific way after the accident wind blade coming from the tip of her kunai slashed it in half. Oh god. She had just killed another human being. Even if that was an enemy, it was still a human being. She actually did it. She had murdered another living creature. She trembled like crazy, the kunai fell from her hand and embedded itself on the ground with a thud. The nauseous feeling once again rose up in her throat, she kneeled down and puked everything in her stomach out. Is this what being a shinobi means? A life full of killing and murdering without any remorse, without even a blink of an eye? If that's the case, what has she even been striving for? All of her energy seemed to be drained from her body at once. She slumped down on the ground, and the last thing she saw before completely falling into darkness was her Kazekage exploding in a storm of chakra. How long more does it take to get there, Sasuke? Naruto impatiently questioned his friend while shuffling uneasily on the back of the hawk he was sharing with the Uchiha. The position itself wasn't that uncomfortable, but whenever he thought of Gaara, his stomach once again started feeling like it was burning. It's easy to understand, the enemy was the Akatsuki themselves, and even though Itachi had returned to their side, the other ninja of the organization were still nothing they could afford to underestimate. There were still Kisame, the tailless-tailed beast, master of the chakra-draining sword Saimata, Deidara, the mad bomber who had devastated Iwagakure in his days of wrecking havoc, Sasori of the Red Sand, the one who murdered the third Kazekage, and Naruto's stomach did a backflip with his thought, what if Pain, no, Nagato, himself entered the fray? Or Tobi decided to directly involve himself with the Jinchuriki capture mission? Not to mention, what if the Akatsuki got for themselves someone new he had never met during his timeline? The more he thought, the more he didn't want to think anymore. I know you're worried, but this is already the fastest we could go. The Uchiha screamed back at him while trying to block the wind slapping at his face. The hawks can only fly this fast without harming us, and Sunagakure is at least tens of thousands of kilometers away from Konoha. And we cannot fly straight through the desert, the enemy will shoot us down for sure. I know, Naruto yelled back. But... Naruto, how far can you use the Flying Thunder God Jutsu to move to? Kakashi, sitting on the back of the other hawk, suddenly shouted. Huh? Naruto shouted back at him. I can move to where Gaara is if we're in the range of 20 kilometers. Out of that range, I have no way to sense where the beacon is. Then we're going to get there soon. Janaf, the hawk he was riding on, said. We're entering the border of the desert, and if I'm not wrong, we will be in range in about 20 minutes. Hearing that, Naruto felt the weight on his heart being lifted away a bit. Even from this far away, he could still feel a surge of chakra coming from the direction of Sunagakure. Hang on, Gaara. I'm coming to help you. The puppets clashed against each other once again. Kankuro jumped away, making a distance between him and Sasori and cursed in annoyance. No matter what move he made, it was read through by the master puppeteer and countered thoroughly. What the Akatsuki member said didn't manage to cheer him up any little bit. I have to admit, you are one of the better puppeteers I've met. Rarely has anyone who can control the puppet I created that well. But unfortunately for you, that's not enough to go against someone like me. You should run away when you still have the chance. Kankuro cursed mentally again. The master puppeteer in front of him had just been toying with him. He knew that he was much less skilled than his opponent in the art of puppetry, but still. It was just like he was less than an ant in the eyes of the Akatsuki member. Kankuro gritted his teeth. He hated being useless, but he wasn't a fool. Even though he was already a jonin, he still knew when he was completely outmatched. Sorry, but Gaara already assigned me the mission of protecting the shelter. I cannot run away and leave those citizens of Sunagakure in danger. Even if I have to sacrifice my own life. He closed his eyes, and when they snapped open again, a look full of determination could be seen clearly in them. I will protect this place with everything I have. He pulled out 2 more scrolls from his weapon pouch and unsealed them. 2 more puppets appeared in a burst of smoke. Black Ant and Salamander, Sasori said while observing the 2 new puppets carefully. 2 of my old creations. You know that they're useless against me. I already knew everything they can do. Using them against me is no different from suicide. Kankuro didn't bother answering. If everything about those puppets was already known by his enemy, then it was time to bring out something even the creator of the puppets didn't know about. He flicked his hands, and the puppets exploded into pieces. With another flick of his hands, the pieces gathered together, and started resembling themselves back up. Had Sasori still kept his original human body, he would have raised his eyebrow in surprise and intrigue. Oh? I definitely didn't make any function like this in those puppets. There was no sign of the 3 old puppets Sasori had made anymore. No. More like, they were still there, but in a completely different form no one could realize anymore. In fact, the new puppet at Kankuro's side right now was something no one had ever seen before. It took a humanoid form, but had 6 large arms made from the arms from Crow and Black Ant, each of which held a bladed weapon. The head of the puppet looked like the combination of the 3 old puppets' heads, with 3 different faces looking at 3 directions. You might know everything about Crow, Black Ant, and Salamander. The Suna Jonin growled. But let's see if you can follow Asura's movement. He threw his right hand forward. Immediately, the new puppet lunged itself at Sasori's puppet armor in a blinding speed. Its 4 upper and middle hands came down at the Akatsuki member with a deadly cross-chop. But this was nothing. The tail of Hiruko was very hard and sharp, and he could pierce the humanoid puppet before it could reach him. Then Sasori was taken aback when he felt the tail of Hiruko not moving like he wanted it to move. TSK. The tail was being locked in place by a bunch of very small chakra strings. It must be because of the last clashes between the 2 puppets. Kankuro had taken that golden opportunity to send his own chakra strings to hinder the movement of Sasori's puppet. Without the tail to destroy the enemy weapon before it could touch him, Sasori couldn't avoid in time, and the new puppet of the Suna loyalist finally managed to land its attack on the target it was supposed to destroy. With a sickening cracking sound, as if a whole bundle of sticks was broken at the same time, the body of Sasori's puppet armor was shattered into splinters. From inside the broken puppet, a dark figure leapt out and very quickly, tried to retreat into the shadow of the buildings nearby. But Kankuro wasn't going to let him do that. You're not getting away. With another flick of Kankuro's finger, the front mouth of Asura opened and blasted a torrent of fire at the direction of the enemy. The raging fire blast obliterated the buildings with a series of loud explosions. But to Kankuro's surprise and horror, when the flame died down, "It seems you're better than I thought. Maybe I will have to use a bit more of my real power." A small human figure walked out of the debris of the collapsed, burning building. He wore a black coat decorated with red clouds. Hovering above him was another puppet with black hair, wearing a tattered cloak. "You." Kankuro gritted his teeth. "How did you escape that?" The Akatsuki member opened his mouth, but the answer came from a different voice, behind him. It's not surprising. After all, he is Sasori of the Red Sand, the infamous missing nin of Suna who was rumored to have murdered the third Kazekage by himself. Kankuro's head snapped back, and he realized immediately who had just said those words. Lady Chio. The old puppeteer was standing right behind him. Her face donned a serious, grim expression much different from the goofy and senile look she usually had, and behind her, the most powerful army of puppets in Sunagakure, the 10 puppets of Chikamatsu, was hovering menacingly. It's been a long time. Sasori's voice rose. His face didn't show any expression. Grandmother. Baki closed his eyes, trying to use his ears to track down the enemies coming at him in a pincer. 5 from the left. 4 from the right. 7 from behind. And above. He grimaced. There were more enemies than he thought. His hope now only lay on the plan he had thought of and the traps he had set for it. If the plan failed. He shook his head. This was not the time to think about something like that. The plan had to succeed, or he would die for sure. There was no time to think about failure. The sound of footsteps on dried leaves was getting closer and closer. This was the only chance for him. Bracing himself, he rushed out of the tree he was hiding behind and launched 6 kunai infused with wind chakra toward every direction in front of him. The knives pierced through the air, flying toward the incoming White Zetsu battalion. But it seemed the attack was ineffective, because the Zetsu dodged the kunai easily. They continued rushing at Baki, their arms started twisting into weapons, ready to skewer him. The kunai continued flying, and cut the nearly invisible strings hanging on the branches of the trees behind the White Zetsu. From above, blocks of wood with very sharp spikes embedded on them fell down on the head of the advancing White Zetsu. Taken by surprise, 5 of the Zetsu were crushed mercilessly under the barrage of wooden projectiles without even being able to react. But the other ones were lucky enough to dodge the deadly traps. They jumped aside then continued leaping at the Sunajonin. The humanoid creatures gleefully grabbed the shinobi, and for a moment, it seemed that was it for Baki. Then the Suna shinobi exploded so hard it put shrapnels on the trees nearby. At the very last second, Baki had used a very professionally timed substitution jutsu to switch himself with his Jonin flak jacket, which was stuffed with explosive tags. The explosion took 6 White Zetsus out of the fight, and now, there was only 5 more. And seeing the fate of their kin, it looked like they were thinking of running away instead of continuing the assault on the lone Jonin. You're not getting away, Baki yelled out, rushing at the remaining enemies with both his hands encased in wind chakra. Those things had the advantage of number, but their skills in battle were less than that of a normal Chunin. Even when injured, if there were only this many, he's sure he could take them down. Then suddenly he felt his legs being grabbed from below. What? He looked back, and was horrified when he saw a pair of white slimy hands sticking out of the ground, grabbing his ankles. Underground. But when? His eyes widened when he realized what was going on. He was too naive. He had thought that the only things attacking him were the ones above the ground, but he had completely forgotten that they were able to stay underground long and far enough for him not to sense even by sound. Baki collapsed on the ground painfully, face first. The blades of wind on his hands faded away harmlessly. The White Zetsu started piling up on him, and he knew this was the end. There was no way he could escape alive anymore. Fang over fang. Then he felt the enemies on his back being lifted off his body. No, more like, they were being ripped off his body violently. At the same time, he heard a firm, but gentle, yell, and the ground behind him, where the one holding his ankles was hiding in, was torn apart, and his assailant was blasted into the air before being covered in a cloud of chakra-destroying insects. Hey, he said weakly. Konoha has come, after all. Then he fainted. When he came back to his sense, he realized 4 people, 2 males and 2 females, and a white dog were looking down at him. Ah, he's awake, the male wearing a pair of sunglasses said. But before he could say anything, his view was once again obstructed by a ball of fur. Baki-sama. He heard a familiar female shrieking voice. You're still alive. I'm so glad. Wow. Patting his overly emotional summon on the head, Baki pushed himself up from the ground. But immediately, he winced because of the sharp pain piercing through his torso. Arg. You shouldn't move so suddenly, Baki-san, the brown-haired woman said, pushing him back down gently. You've just recovered from a fatal injury, and you lost quite a bit of blood. Lucky for you that we have a certified medic like Hinata here. Just keep it down for a while, will you? Hearing that, Baki reluctantly stopped his struggle. Only now did he manage to have a good look at his saviors. "You are Kurenai Yuhi, the famous genjutsu mistress of Konoha, right?" Kurenai fanned her face with her right hand. "I won't say that I have anything really worthy to be called famous, Baki-san. But yeah, you're right, I am Kurenai Yuhi, of Konoha." Baki narrowed his eyes. "How can I be sure that you are not an enemy transforming into? Because as far as I know, they have that ability, after all." "Hey! How dare you, you bastard!" Kiba retorted angrily. "We've just saved your life, and now you dare asking that kind of question?" "Kiba." Kurenai glared at her student. Then she turned back to Baki. "I'm sorry for the reaction of my subordinate. And you're right, you have the right to be suspicious of us, after the ordeal you've just been through. If you want to confirm our identity, just ask your summon over here. It was her who brought us here from Konoha." Baki looked at Tatsumaki. The weasel nodded. "She's telling the truth, Baki-sama. I brought them here straight from Konoha to save you." The Suna Jonin continued to glare at the Konoha shinobi for a while. Then, he relaxed his body with a deep sigh. "Sorry for doubting you. It was just. After what happened, I cannot let my guard down against anything." Kurenai nodded. "I can understand that. Now, what happened to you?" Baki sighed again. "In order to deliver the letter to Konoha quickly, I had to choose the fastest way possible, which is going through the desert. On my way, I saw the 3 Akatsuki members flying towards Suna on the back of some kind of bird, but I managed to avoid being noticed by them. At least until I was ambushed by a bunch of those things coming from underground." He pointed at the white Zetsu corpses on the ground. "They were not very skilled, but they overwhelmed me with their number, and they have quite a lot of dangerous abilities. I had to do everything I could just to survive. If they're that weak, then what does Suna have to fear of?" Kiba noted. "Surely even if they have the advantage in number, Suna shinobi are not just cannon fodders either, right?" "You don't understand," Baki grimaced. "There are too many of them, and those 3 Akatsuki members. Although it's just a glimpse, I could realize one of them. It was one of the most notorious wanted criminal of Sunagakure, the most dangerous one, Sasori of the Red Sand." "Sasori of the Red Sand?" Kurenai exclaimed. "Isn't that the one who is wanted in the whole elemental continent for murdering the 3rd Kazekage?" Baki nodded grimly. "Exactly. And if that's the case, Sunagakure is in grave danger." Gaara thrust both his arms forward. The sand dragon immediately split into 2 and rushed the 2 Akatsuki members with vengeance. The 2 terrorists dodged aside, but the sand didn't stop. It continued stubbornly following them, eager to devour them to the little bit of their bodies. Kisame slashed at the sand. The chakra in the sand where he slashed was shaved off the particles, but it couldn't stop the incoming assault. The sand itself acted as the conductor of Gaara's chakra from his body, pumping more into the part devoid of chakra, bringing it back to life again immediately. Hey, isn't this a little bit too much, yeah?" Deidara said, a little bit hysterically, when trying to dodge the sand appendage on the back of another one of his clay bird. "I didn't mean to piss him off this much, yeah." Kisame didn't bother answering. Or maybe, he was too busy slashing the sand tentacles aiming at him to answer. "God damn it." Deidara swore. "Faye, it seems it's the time to give you the taste of some of my arts, yeah." His hands plunged into the clay pouches on his belts, and a few seconds later, 4 swallows made of clay appeared from the mouths on the hands. He threw them back at Gaara's direction, and the birds popped into life and darted towards the Kazekage with blinding speed. The swallows were smaller than the bird of prey he was riding on, and more flexible too. They swerved through the sand tentacles easily and rushed the seemingly defenseless Jinchuriki. But the missiles couldn't even touch Gaara. 4 bullets made of sand struck them with a terrifying precision when they were still on the air, and the only thing they could do was exploding harmlessly. TSK. Then suddenly Deidara felt himself being thrown violently across the air. Tendrils made of sand had popped out of the ground and skewered the clay bird he was sitting on. He did a few backflips and landed on the ground safely, but more and more sand spikes popped out of the ground, and he had to jump away frantically to avoid being turned into mincemeat. "This is getting us nowhere," Kisame muttered. He returned Seimata to the holster on his back, and after dodging another sand appendage coming at him, he quickly flipped through hand seals. Water style, water shark barrage. Upon finishing the hand signs, the shark man spat out a torrent of water. The water condensed, and formed the shape of 5 giant sharks, which rushed Gaara like 5 missiles and crashed into the sand wall hastily rising up in front of him, one by one. Gaara winced under the pressure. Even though the sand wall was built by the chakra of Shukaku herself, the force coming from the barrage was just too powerful and brutal. The explosion from the contact also managed to take some of the fighting Suna shinobi off their feet, and they were immediately swarmed by the horde of white Zetsus attacking them. They are too powerful. If I continue fighting them here, they will destroy the village and kill everyone. He made a twisting gesture with his right hand. Immediately, the two Akatsuki members were blasted with geysers of sand erupting from the ground below them. They were flung into the sky, and crashed painfully on the desert outside of the village. Gaara also landed in front of them. He said, his voice was cold as ice. "Now that we're out of the village, any last words?" Deidara just gave him a nasty grin. He reached into his clay pouch and pulled out a handful of clay. The mouth on his hand greedily devoured it immediately. "Yeah, my last words are, you might be able to defeat us here, but can you protect your beloved shinobi in there?" Then, with a movement no one could even expect, he formed a hand seal. "What are you?" And the whole Sunagakure started rumbling from below. "Prepare to see your village blasted into the sky with my art of C2, Kazekage," shouted Deidara gleefully. Right on cue, explosions broke out from everywhere in the village. He must have set explosives underground. But how could he? My power should have repelled any intruder coming from underground. And Gaara's eyes widened. Now he had remembered. It was that very moment. Deidara had managed to dig himself out of the debris of the collapsed tower. "Og, I think I got a concussion there." "Yeah." He groaned, holding his head. Chiyo looked at the new puppet behind Sasori's back with a wary eye. "So, the rumor that you killed the third Kazekage. It was true after all." "What do you mean, Lady Chiyo?" Kankuro asked in confusion. The old woman pointed at the new puppet. "Sasori was the one who invented the way to turn human corpses into puppets. And unless I was completely insane, that was the body of the third Kazekage." "You're still as sharp as ever, grandmother," the voice inside the puppet said. "You're right, this is the third Kazekage. He is one of my favorite puppets. And you might become my next one." Chiyo's eyes narrowed. "Don't be arrogant, Sasori. You forgot who taught you the art of puppetry already?" Sasori didn't lose his calm. "Oh, of course I still remember. Your 10 puppets of Chikamatsu hidden art is one of the most fearsome puppet arts in the shinobi world. But unfortunately for you, I have surpassed you long ago." From the third Kazekage puppet, a stream of something that looked like black sand poured out. And Chiyo's eyes widened when she realized what it was. "That? How did you?" "Yes, grandmother, that's the third Kazekage's iron sand," Sasori answered. "I have advanced my human puppet art to a pinnacle no one could do before. My puppets retain all the skills and jutsu they had when they were alive. They don't need to be living to fight like a true ninja. My art is eternal." Then the black sand curled up around the puppet and morphed into a cube behind it. Chiyo's eyes widened. She'd been too used to this kind of attack, when the third Kazekage was still alive. "Kankuro!" she barked. "Get out of there immediately." "What?" Kankuro nearly jumped, startled. "Ah, yeah." He pulled at Asura and jumped back, and it was so fortunate of him that he did that, because right after his feet left the ground, a very sharp spike exploded out of the cube of black sand and would have skewered him had he just been 1 second slower. The iron sand of the third Kazekage can become weapons for him to attack at any range, the old woman said. One simple touch from it can bring down any kind of machinery for as long as the source of the chakra is still intact. Also, from what I know about Sasori, it won't be a surprise if the sand is infused with lethal poison. Those words of Chiyo sent chill to Kankuro's back. Had he just been 1 step slower. "You should retreat, Kankuro," said Chiyo when flexing her hands. "This is not the kind of enemy you can do anything against. I will take him from here." Then she flicked her hands, and all 10 puppets behind her sprang to life. They gathered around her, ready to attack. "Are you sure you are able to take me on?" Sasori asked. "Face it, grandmother, you're old. Just like your puppet arts, they might be the most powerful before, but now, I've surpassed them. You have no chance against me." "You don't know until you try," Chiyo just answered him bluntly. "However, there is something I want to ask you first. With your power, you could have taken Kankuro down without breaking a sweat." Dash at her side, Kankuro made an expression of half a cringe, half a frown. "Then why didn't you just do that? It's just like you're trying to prolong the fight on purpose. To wait for something." Sasori didn't answer her for a while. Then he said, "You're still very sharp, grandmother. But it's too late now, because it's already started." Before Chiyo and Kankuro could understand what was happening, the whole village had heaved up in a series of deafening explosions. "I need to go back to Sunagakure immediately," Baki said, pushing himself up from the ground. My village is under attack now, I can't just sit here and do nothing. But Kurenai gently pushed the Jonin back down. You don't have to force yourself, Baki-san. The team we sent there was already on their way, right now you need to focus on saving your strength first. Hearing that, Baki shouted in rage. What? I've risked my own life to get the letter to Konoha to ask for reinforcement, and what you gave us is just one team. What kind of ally are you? Kurenai looked at Baki and smiled. Don't worry, Baki-san. That's the very best thing Konoha can give you as reinforcement. And when I said that it's the best thing, I mean it literally. Because. She looked away to the sky. That team has 3 of our finest Jonin, and Naruto Uzumaki. Baki's eyes widened. Damn you, Gaara shouted, horrified. Are you aiming your attack at the village on purpose? Of course, Deidara laughed cruelly. You're hard to take down, but the village together with everything inside it is a way easier target. You coward. Gaara snarled in rage and sent a wave of sand at the 2 Akatsuki members, but Kisame had moved between him and Deidara and blocked the attack with a giant wave of water coming from his mouth. Gaara cursed, the Kiri missing nin wasn't called the tailed beast without tail for nothing. Attacking us is useless, Kage. The mad bomber laughed and took off again on the back of another clay bird. Even if you kill us here, there is nothing that can stop your village from being destroyed. Gaara gritted his teeth. He knew what the Akatsuki bomber said was true, there was no way to stop the explosions which were devastating the village right now. The only thing he could do was to protect the Suna shinobi who were fighting inside the village with his sand, but that would take away his concentration on the 2 terrorists. And in a battle like this, losing his focus meant death. There's only one choice for him now. It seems we have to go all out now, Shukaku. Will you let me work with you, and borrow your power? As long as you use it to crush those Akatsuki to a pulp. Shukaku answered angrily. No one makes a mockery of me or my Jinchuriki right on my home turf like this. Take all of my power and show them who the boss is here. Very well. Then. Let's go. Gaara clapped his hands together, and the desert exploded. A shockwave of chakra swept through the air, making the 2 hawks swerve dangerously on their way. What the hell is that? Sasuke exclaimed. Isn't that Shukaku's chakra? Naruto's stomach twisted. What happened that forced Gaara to use this much of Shukaku's chakra? No matter what it was, it couldn't be anything good. How long more? He yelled, and the hawk answered. 5 more minutes until we're in range. You'd better get yourself ready. Hearing that, Naruto's heart felt a little bit calmer. He closed his eyes and drew on his chakra, trying to reach out to the flying thunder god beacon he had left with Gaara. Hang on, Gaara. Please don't be down until I get there. Then a gigantic explosion shook the whole desert. Finally, the Jinchuriki decided to use his final form. Deidara laughed on the back of his bird. That's good, Kisame said. Now that he turned into his beast form, he's no longer able to use his skills to defend himself. Then he had to hastily jump away when a humongous drilling air bullet obliterated the place he had just been standing just 1 second ago. The blast was so powerful even after he leapt away, he was still sent flying from the sheer pressure of the wind. Okay, I take my word back. He still can use his skills, after all. Wind style, Aeroblast. Gaara/Shukaku bellowed, and set a blast of their most destructive technique straight at the 2 Akatsuki members. This time, Kisame knew he could not survive even if he dodged, and he hastily swung Saimata in front of him. The sword slashed through the jutsu, absorbing most of the chakra forming it. But since the technique was made of natural air compressed by raw wind chakra, all the air in the jutsu exploded violently upon being drained of the chakra holding it together. Luckily for Kisame, Saimata acted as a shield to block the raging tornado from shredding him to bits, but the bandage covering it was thoroughly torn apart, and scratches could be seen all over the scales of the sword. Some of the scales were even broken down into pieces. It screeched out in pain. His Akatsuki robe also received deep gashes everywhere, although it's not as much as being destroyed completely. But when the tornado died down... Wait, where is that bomber? Looking up, Gaara knew immediately where he was. He was hovering far above the village on the back of another clay dragon, replacing the clay bird he had just been on which couldn't reach a high altitude, out of the range his sand could reach. On his hand, there was a clay statue. A statue completely different from the ones he had been using. Have a look at my greatest art before perishing together with your dear village, Kage. My C3 is the biggest blast. When the statue left Deidara's hand and enlarged itself into a gigantic bell-like thing the size of the Kage Tower in the air, Gaara knew there was no other choice. Either him, or the village. And he didn't even hesitate. There's no time for him to hesitate, after all. Naruto's heart jumped when he felt the huge chakra of Shukaku suddenly disappeared. That could only mean, we're in range. Janaf, the hawk Naruto was riding on, shouted. I can already see Sunagakure at the horizon. Alright. Naruto's eyes snapped open. He shouted back. Everyone, get your hand on me and hold tight. The four shinobi jumped off the back of the hawks. Sasuke grabbed Naruto's right arm, Sakura held on his left hand, and Kakashi grabbed his shoulder. They fell down to the desert below. And disappeared in a yellow flash. The war inside the walls of Sunagakure suddenly came to a halt when a gigantic dome of sand covered the whole village, drowning everyone in darkness. Then, a deafening explosion shook the village to the core. The shockwave coming from it was so terrifying everyone, including the white Zetsus, was sent tumbling into the ground. Some of the shinobi even bled through their ears and noses. What the hell was that? Kankuro exclaimed in horror. Sasori looked at the dome of sand. His face was still expressionless. That level of explosion. To think the Kazekage has the skill to force Deidara to use C3 of all things. But no matter. With this, the fight should be over. Chiyo's face tensed up. She barked. Kankuro. Go to Kazekage-sama now. Leave Sasori to me. You really think I would let him run away like that? Sasori flicked his hand, and the third Kazekage puppet rushed forward. The iron sand block came into life again, sending another black tendril at the retreating Kankuro. But the movement couldn't escape the eye of a veteran puppeteer like Chiyo. Even faster than the sand spear, the bald puppet in her collection charged Sasori himself. Cables shot out from the holes on its skull, and would have skewered Sasori had he just been one fraction of a second lower to halt the attack on Kankuro to retreat. You are even faster in controlling your puppets than I knew you were, he noted, looking at Chiyo while Kankuro was sprinting away. He no longer felt interested in that normal shinobi anymore, rather, his focus was now on his old grandmother. I didn't spend all the years of retirement doing nothing, Sasori, the elder answered. She flexed her fingers, and her battalion of puppets rushed Sasori at the same time. But the younger puppeteer nimbly avoided all the strikes coming from the puppets, albeit not without any damage. The feminine puppet wielding the two falchions managed to land a slash on his coat, leaving a deep gash on it. And Chiyo's eyes widened. No way. You. She immediately pulled back her puppets and retreated a few steps. What have you done? To your own body? She gritted her teeth. Oh? So you noticed it? Sasori's voice, annoyingly, still didn't even show a hint of emotion. That's true, it's exactly what you thought. But you have to admit, with this body, my art has finally reached the pinnacle of everlasting existence. It deserves the name of true art now, doesn't it, grandmother? The old woman couldn't find any word to say for a while. Finally, when she managed to say something, her face was firm and rigid, and there was something that looked like utter disappointment. The body of a human is not something you can throw away that freely and easily, Sasori, she said. Replacing parts of your body with mechanical parts is one thing, but when you completely discard your human body for a puppet, it is no different from discarding your humanity. Why couldn't you understand that? Of course I understand that, admitted Sasori, making Chiyo raise an eyebrow. But I don't have any use for humanity. Having humanity means having useless, unnecessary emotions. I don't need that to achieve ultimate art. Once again, the old puppeteer was left with no word to retort. Then it seems my duty here is to take you down. No, to destroy you, for the sake of this village and the shinobi world, she said, and her army of puppets once again came back to life. I'm looking forward to seeing you do that, grandmother, Sasori answered, and the puppet of the third Kazekage also sprang to action. Ha! So that's everything the Kazekage could do after all. Yeah, Deidara laughed when looking at the result of his art. The body of Shukaku made from sand was melted to the core from the sheer heat of the explosion, leaving a statue of molten glass where it had stood before. Gaara's unconscious body fell out of the statue onto the desert ground with a thud. I have to compliment you, Kazekage, you managed to force me to use all of my reserved clay for that C3 after all. The mad bomber jumped off his clay dragon and landed on the ground. But there is no way you can stand against my art. Yeah. You're a fool, Deidara, Kisame thought while walking up to retrieve the Jinchuriki's body. If he actually intended to slay us at all cost, everything else be damned, we wouldn't be able to stand here now. Just look at that dome of sand to see. He glanced at the sand dome Gaara had built to protect the village right before the bomb detonated. It was still standing firmly, Even though the power of the C3 bomb had taken down even the Shukaku form he had changed into. He sacrificed himself, without even a glimpse of regret, to stop that bomb from harming the village. Hey, just a brat and he already. Even I can't help but feel impressed. He walked to where Gaara's body was lying. Alright, so the mission is a success. Let's get him and sound the Reacher. He couldn't finish the sentence, because a foot had landed on his face. From thin air. His body was tossed away, and even the sand of the desert couldn't help him from crashing to the ground painfully. He immediately regained his balance and looked around. Standing in his way right now were 4 shinobi wearing Konoha headbands, who were throwing the Akatsuki members glares full of fury. You are not bringing Gaara anywhere, the one standing in the middle, Naruto Uzumaki, the Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tails Fox, said in a deathly cold voice. Nine-Tails, said Kisame calmly, his eyes didn't leave the face of the one who had just kicked him. He wiped his mouth with his sleeve. Naruto's kick was enough to draw blood on his face. It's been a long time, he greeted Naruto with a menacing grin. Naruto pointed at Kisame. We're not going to let you bring Gaara away, fish face. Kisame's eyebrow twitched. Fish face? Yeah. Naruto answered hotly. No one ever told you how much you look like a tuna? A tuna with pointy teeth. Everyone face-bombed. You have really big balls, Nine-Tails, Kisame grinned viciously. Our mission is just to bring back the one tail, but leader might be even happier if I bring back the 9 tails together with it. Oh yeah? Naruto retorted. Just try me, you fishfa. Naruto's insult was cut short when Kakashi grabbed his shoulder. Kakashi-sensei? He looked back at his sensei in surprise. The Jonin shook his head, both of his eyes still stayed firmly on the 2 Akatsuki members. We don't have much time to waste here. You are the only hope to stop this assault on Sunagakure. You and Sakura will go in there and put an end to this. His Sharingan started spinning in his left eye socket when he said these words. You think we are going to let the Jinchuriki run away that easily? Deidara snorted, and jumped onto his clay dragon's back again, ready to take off. But he was surprised when Sasuke suddenly appeared in front of him, his weapon, Namikaze, out and activated, to deliver a merciless thrust at his torso. No one even saw the Uchiha moving. Only sheer luck helped him escape being skewered by the blade made of lightning. He kicked the Uchiha down to the ground and hastily took off on the back of his dragon. If he was that fast, it would be utterly unwise to stay on the ground any longer. Sasuke backtracked a few steps, and looked back at Naruto and Sakura. Go, you two. Take Gaara away and leave this place to me and Kakashi. So that's Sasuke Thunderbird Uchiha, huh? Kisame grinned, brandishing Saimata again when Naruto and Sakura grabbed Gaara's body on the ground. This is gonna be fun. Slaying the little brother of that traitor Itachi by my own hand. Whether you can do that or not, we still have to see, Sasuke rebuffed, and Namikaze's energy blade flared up again. But before the Uchiha could jump Kisame, Kakashi had already stood in front of his face, his back turning toward him. Just leave Kisame to me, the older Jonin said. You are the only one who can fly here, you must go and take down Deidara before he can do any more harm to the village. Who said you can interfere, Kakashi of the Sharingan? Kisame bellowed and leapt at the 2 Konoha shinobi. Saimata drew an arc on the air, coming down on Kakashi's head. But before it could even reach the Konoha Jonin, it had been stopped on its way by another sword. It was a tanto with a pointy blade, and bathing in the harsh sunlight of the desert, it shone brightly in a white light. The famous white light chakra saber, having belonged to White Fang Sakumo Hatake. The missing nin grinned while pushing his sword down further. Such an honor to see a sword with such a great history. That's right, Kakashi answered, sending more power into his arms to push back the giant spiky sword. And its history will have another page written with your defeat here today. Gaara's eyes fluttered open. The first thing he saw was the mop of spiky blonde hair hovering right in front of his face. Nah. Ruto. Said Blonde grinned cheerily. Welcome back to the world of living, Gaara. The young Kazekage pushed himself up from the ground. He held his head in pain. Ugh. I only remember spending all my chakra to stop that mad bomber's final blast. What happened to the village? From what we saw, it is still standing, Sakura answered in Naruto's place. She was the one who brought Gaara back to consciousness. But I don't think the shinobi in there can hold on much longer if we don't do anything. From what I heard, you are outnumbered quite a bit, right? Yeah. Gaara muttered in disdain. Now I can't even do anything, both my chakra and Shukaku's ran out completely, and now she's sleeping inside my seal. Then he felt Naruto's hand grabbing his right shoulder. Suddenly he felt himself alive. All of his chakra was rejuvenated in an instant, and all of his fatigue, pain and injury seemingly disappeared in a blink of an eye. There, that might be enough, Naruto looked at him, still grinning. Or maybe you need a little bit more? No, that's more than enough, Gaara smiled. He stood up from the ground. More than enough to protect Sunagakure from those monsters already. Naruto grinned. Then let's go in there, yeah? Gaara nodded. He made a twisting motion with his hand, and a hole opened on the dome. The three shinobi leapt through the hole, and rushed into the battle. This might be the proper time to talk about the battle within the village, inside the Dome of Sand. When Gaara created the Dome of Sand to protect the village from Deidara bomb, the only thing in his mind had been stopping the gigantic explosion from reducing the village to rubble. He didn't even think about his own life, the safety of other Suna shinobi was more important. And because of that, he had also forgotten another crucial detail. The sand dome he had created was incredibly strong enough to withstand the explosion from Deidara C3. That meant it was very, very solid. Nothing could get through it. Even sunlight. That meant every shinobi of Sunagakure had suffered a sudden loss in their vision, right in the middle of battle. The consequence was that the inexperienced ones were taken aback by the sudden darkness, and a lot of them were fatally wounded by the incoming White Zetsu army, in just a very short moment. The only consolation was, that was also the only thing the White Zetsu army could do. Abominable as they were, they still had to depend on their vision to know where to attack. The injuries they had managed to deal to the shinobi in the darkness were due to them blindly flailing around from the sudden loss of vision and hit the shinobi by accident. Right now, they were fumbling around like a horde of zombies, trying to find someone to hit. Many of them were taken down by their own kin. In contrast, the shinobi of Sunagakure had realized the problem right when it came down on their heads. They had immediately retreated back together and formed manji formations to protect themselves, but hadn't dared to do anything reckless. Basically, the war inside the dome was now in a complete stalemate. In a situation like this, the disadvantage definitely belonged to the side with the smaller army, because their enemy could just blindly rush in and overwhelm them with sheer number. Especially when they were outnumbered 1 by 5 and the enemies didn't even care about the life of their own, or of their comrades. And that was what gave Akira Fuji a big fit of panic at the moment. He was just an average Junon who had just graduated from the academy for a few months. He barely had any real battle experience. Most of his work as an official shinobi by now had only included D-rank missions, which were basically chores. Although he had studied fighting in the darkness in the academy, he had never had any chance to practice it in real life. Therefore, suddenly being robbed of his vision, especially during a savage war like this, which he was thrown into so suddenly, it was a huge question how he had still managed to keep his calm until now. Okay. Calm down. What did I learn during the academy years? Like hell he could calm down right now. The truth was, he had fought with everything he had. He knew that he had duty with the village to protect her and defend her from the invaders. And he had done everything he could. But still, even so, right now he only wanted to run far, far away from this hell of a battlefield. Even the darkness around him right now couldn't help him forget the terrifying vision of corpses lying in pools of blood around the village, on the streets he always had to walk on every day to get back home from the academy, which included both the white abominations and his Sunagakure comrades. Suddenly he felt his body stumbling forward as he stepped on something. That something felt like a pipe, but it was much softer and smoother than a steel pipe. Then it must be someone's limb. Luckily for him, he was sure that it was still connected to the body of someone. Because his body fell right on top of the person lying on the ground, and his face landed right next to that someone's face. And thanks to the close distance, he realized who the owner of that limb was. Himiko-chan. Naturally, he scrambled up as quickly as he could, and he stared at the figure lying in front of him in shock and disbelief. Himiko Sakuraba, the kunoichi of the year in his class, and his secret crush, was lying unconscious on the ground in front of him. In the middle of the battle. Hesitantly, he touched her chest. He definitely would have been slapped to death if he'd done that in any other situation, but as she's unconscious now, he wouldn't have to worry about that. And he was relieved when he felt her chest heaving up and down gently, meaning she's still alive. Usually, in different situations, he would definitely try to sneak a kiss on her. But now wasn't the time for perverted ideas. She would be killed for sure if even one single enemy arrived here. Gritting his teeth, he tried to get the girl up from where she was lying. He cursed when he felt her body not budging an inch. He had been pretty sure there was no way his idol could be this heavy. Maybe it was because of the fatigue he had gotten during the battle, or maybe it was like other people said, corpses were always heavier than living people. He mentally slapped himself. What the hell am I even thinking about? She is not dead yet. Don't think about stupid things. Suddenly he felt chill on his spine. He snapped his head back, and realized an enemy looming over them, its arm, which was full of spikes, raising high, ready to strike. Akira's body was frozen in place. He couldn't move a muscle, not only because of his lack of experience and the scary enemy, but also because of the burden he had to bear, the friend he was protecting with his life. And even more than that, the fear he had tried his best to suppress in the deepest part of his mind since the beginning of the battle had resurfaced again, violently and cruelly. Nothing can be worse than the fear of death threatening to break out when you are facing death itself. No, life was not always as beautiful and romantic as in flowery novels. Even though your action might be noble, it wouldn't always help you escape the fear of being killed. After all, people die if they are killed, that's the way of life. No matter how noble, how heroic it might sound, dying was definitely not something he or anyone could ever want. I don't want to die. Someone. Please help us. The sound escaped his mouth involuntarily when the spiky arm came down mercilessly on his head. And help appeared before him in the form of a yellow flash. 5,000. 5,000 shadow clones. How many times do I have to tell you not to use that many shadow clones at the same time, Naruto? Oh, come on now, Kokuo. This is a war, and in a war I have to use everything I have, right? You. Having someone like Naruto, who could balance the scale of the battle on his own on their side, definitely helped Sunagakure in their problem right now. But even so, sending 5,000 of the same Jinchuriki who could fight someone like Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno, two of the most famous shinobi in the whole continent right now, to a battlefield was definitely overkill. I don't think you should even bother, Kokuo, Kurama sighed in defeat, rubbing the bridge of her snout. Seriously, he lit himself up using my chakra to use as a lantern. I feel so humiliated right now. Indeed, Naruto was now glowing brightly, being coated in Kurama's chakra cloak. Not only him, but every clone he sent to the battlefield was also glowing in the same light from their own chakra cloak. The whole Sunagakure right now looked like an advertisement board decorated with thousands of light bulbs, if not counting the bloody corpses lying around. Why don't you just bring the dome down altogether anyway, Gaara? The Jinchuriki of Shukaku shook his head upon Naruto's question. That dome took all of Shukaku's chakra together with mine to create. If I want to dismantle it, I will have to use an equal amount of chakra. Which I don't have right now, considering Shukaku is still exhausted and my seal. She's sleeping right now, and I doubt she will wake up soon. Naruto blinked. Damn. That dome must be very powerful, I bet. There must still be quite a lot of soldiers alive in there, Gar muttered. We must do something to help them. I'll head in there. I don't have access to Shukaku's chakra now, but I'm sure I can still do something with the chakra you gave me. He flicked his hand, and a cloud of sand rose from the ground. He jumped on it and floated into the battle. Maybe I can help with that, too, Sakura said. She bit her finger, flipped through a series of hand seals, then slammed her right hand to the ground. Summoning jutsu. In a cloud of smoke, the giant body of Katsuyu, the queen of slug appeared. Wow, that slug looks even bigger than we saw during the war, huh? Isabu noted. Kokuo nodded. Indeed. As far as I know, that is just a portion of her body. The real body of Katsuyu is much larger than that. It may dwarf even the Ten Tails itself. The reason why no one has ever summoned the whole body is that no human being has enough chakra to do that, Jinchuriki or not. From what I heard, even Hashirama, the first one holding the slug summoning contract of the Senju clan couldn't do it, even with Sakio inside him. Katsuyu-sama, can I depend on you? Sakura looked at her summon. The slug nodded, and started dissolving into thousands of smaller slugs. They started crawling away into the battlefield, where hundreds of injured shinobi were lying there, waiting for death to claim them. Alright, let's do it. The medic exclaimed, and clapped her hands together. The 100-strength seal on her forehead started unfolding and crawling down her face, her shoulders and stopped somewhere hidden inside her shirt, because Naruto didn't see it extending further downward. Naruto, when I use this jutsu to provide healing to others, I cannot move from this place, so I leave my protection to you. Naruto nodded. Don't worry, I got your back. He pulled out something from inside his sleeve. With the unique shape of the tool on Naruto's hand, it took Sakura just a glance to know what it was. It was a brush specially designed for seal drawing. More exactly, the brush made of phoenix feather the third Hokage had given him in his birthday party 3 years ago. He ran a circle around Sakura and started drawing symbols on the ground. When the circle was completed, he sat firmly on the ground and made a hand seal. Uzumaki-style barrier, 9 gates of heaven. On the ground, the seals Naruto had just drawn started glowing. Then, a line of light started connecting them together, forming 9 circles with the same center around the 2 shinobi. From the circles, barriers made of chakra rose up, separating the 2 shinobi with the outside battle. There, Naruto breathed out. As long as I still have chakra, no one can go through this barrier unless I allow them to. This is one of the most powerful barrier jutsu of Uzumaki I learned during the training trip, believe it. It seems you're still hiding a lot of things, eh Naruto? Sakura smiled at him, and he grinned back. Of course. Do you really think that I would show you everything I got during that battle? Sakura didn't answer. She just smiled and turned back to her work. Chakra started flaring up from her body. Needless to say, Sunagakure's shinobi were thrown into another big fit of panic when they saw the newcomers. What the hell is this? An injured shinobi screamed when he felt the white, slimy slug coming out of nowhere and crawling up his body. Is there another force coming to invade us? Akunoichi exclaimed, trying to slash another slug coming for her, only for it to split in half and reconnect itself again without any injury. Then suddenly, they heard Gaara's voice, enhanced by chakra, booming around the village. Shinobi of Sunagakure. Our friends, Konoha, have arrived and are now helping us fighting the enemies. Those slugs are also what they sent, do not worry about them, they are trying to help you. Keep your heads up, now we don't have anything to worry about. Coming with Gaara's words, an army of blonde covered in golden chakra appeared in yellow flashes and started going at the enemies. At the same time, the slugs had also managed to arrive at where the injured were, and were now starting to heal their wounds. Gaara's enhanced voice once again boomed in the air. Sunagakure. This is the time. Let's stand up once again and push the invaders out of our village. Around the village, cheers exploded. And the army of white Zetsu suddenly found themselves being pushed back by the newly revitalized Sunagakure army, together with the army of blonde Jinchuriki coming at them. Kankuro was dashing on the streets of Sunagakure with everything he had in his body. He didn't know what had just happened, but from the sudden dome of sand coming from the middle of nowhere, and the suspicious rumbling on the ground right after the dome appeared, he had a sinking feeling that something had happened to Gaara. Even with the sudden darkness surrounding him, he still remembered the roads of this section of Sunagakure like the back of his hand. What Lady Chiyo told him to do didn't soothe him a little bit. If something happened to Gaara. Kankuro. Is that you? His feet screeched into a halt when he heard Tamari's voice calling his name. Tamari? What are you doing here? He asked, startled. I thought you're with Gaara? It's Gaara himself who told me to go find you and Lady Chiyo. His sister answered urgently. Why are you here? I thought you're helping Lady Chiyo at the shelter? I heard the Akatsuki once saying something about someone named Sasori there. Kankuro nodded, even though it's nearly impossible for his sister to see him doing that. Yeah, it was the infamous Sasori of the Red Sand. Lady Chiyo is taking care of him right now, she told me to go to Gaara after this dome came down on the village. Tamari's eyes widened. Sasori of the Red Sand? Isn't that the one who is rumored to have murdered the 3rd Kazekage? And you left Lady Chiyo alone with him? I didn't want to, but right now I think the only thing we can do is believe in her. Kankuro bit his lip. Old or not, she is still the most powerful puppeteer of Sunagakure, I'm sure she's not going to go down that easily. Tamari grimaced. Yeah. We can only hope so. Suddenly her eyes widened in alarm. They were surrounded by at least 10 presences, and from the chakra signature coming from them, she could be sure that they weren't allies. Kankuro. She started, but the puppeteer didn't even need her warning. His puppet Asura was already on the field, ready for battle. And without a warning, all 10 presences were wiped out in an instant by a vortex of sand. Gaara jumped down his sand cloud, landing in front of them. Tamari, Kankuro. Are you two okay? Nothing could describe the relief of the 2 siblings when they saw their little brother safe and sound. Gaara, Tamari exclaimed. What happened? Are you alright? Why is there suddenly a dome covering the village? The Akatsuki nearly got me when I was busy defending the village from their bombardment, Gaara answered curtly. But we don't have to worry now, reinforcement from Konoha has arrived. Reinforcement. Then Tamari saw a flash of golden light flying through the air behind Gaara, yelling Huo! At the top of his lungs. She stared. Is that Naruto? Gaara nodded. Yes. He and his team have come from Konoha to help us, we don't have to worry about the lack of personnel now. Let's go assisting Lady Chiyo. But what about the other shinobi? Kankuro asked worriedly. Gaara just looked at him, and to his shock and amazement, he saw a smile on his little brother's face. Don't worry. The enemy might have thousands of troops, but we have a Naruto. Sasuke looked at the enemy flying above with calculating eyes. The Akatsuki member he was fighting seemed to be very good at airborne fighting. His preferred tactic was bombarding the targets from the sky at a safe range, but considering the confident expression on his face, it seemed he wasn't afraid of dogfighting, either. But when it comes to fighting in the air, no one could surpass the Hawks. Summoning, Garuda. In a burst of smoke, a hawk larger than the one Sasuke had summoned to transport the Konoha Shinobi to Suna appeared. We are having a difficult enemy here, Garuda, the Uchiha looked at the hawk. Are you up to the task, my friend? The hawk looked at his summoner with an expression that could very well be understood as a bloodthirsty grin. As always, Sasuke-sama. Where is the enemy? The Uchiha pointed upward. The hawk followed his finger, then let out a squawk of excitement. Then what are you waiting for? Hop on. Sasuke grinned, and jumped onto the hawk's back. With a sweeping movement that sent dust flying, the wings on either side of the hawk extended, and he rocketed upward, toward Deidara and his clay dragon. The mad bomber sneered when he saw Sasuke ascending toward him. You want to fight? Then I will give you a fight. He pulled his dragon upward even higher. The mouth of the clay dragon opened wide, and from inside, 5 objects shot out. Upon exposing to the air, they exploded into bursts of smoke, and from the smoke emerged 5 hawks made of clay nearly the size of Garuda. So that's how he does it. Sasuke noted when he saw the tail of the clay dragon retracted about a meter back into its body. If he has to resort to fighting like this, it must be that he is running out of material in those pouches. And I only need to take down that dragon in order to win. He took a glance at the 5 clay hawks which were coming at him. But first of all, I have to take care of these before I can even approach him. Shoot, take Mikaze. As if waiting for the command, the device on Sasuke's hand immediately gave the answer. Yes, master. Third form, Nasu Yoteri, disassembling and reassembling itself, the weapon changed form again. This time, lying on Sasuke's hand was a large bow. It didn't look like any kind of normal bow samurai usually used on the battlefield. Those bows are usually simple looking and light, easy for mobilization. This bow Sasuke was holding. It couldn't be called with any name other than a siege bow. The arc of the bow was very large and thick, a normal person shouldn't have been able to hold it without falling over, and yet Sasuke was wielding it with only his left hand. Running along the body of the bow were 4 large prongs made of adamantine pointing forward at the direction the target of the shooter was, and the trademark blue jewel of Take Mikaze lay in between the 2 middle ones. The 2 tips of the bow were connected by a string made of glowing, blue plasma energy. Let's go in, Garuda. With that declaration, human and hawk rushed forward. As expected of the legendary Kakashi of the Sharingan. Not only are you good at ninjutsu and taijutsu, you are also talented in kenjutsu as well. The 2 swords clashed against each other again. Such an honor to be complimented by the infamous traitorous swordsman of Karagakure himself, Kakashi answered in a mocking tone. You really are an annoying bastard, eh? Kisame grinned nastily. The Kiri missing nin put more strength into his arm, pushing Kakashi down with his sword. And, at the same time, he delivered a brutal kick at the Konoha Jonin's side. But with Kakashi's Sharingan, an attack like that wasn't anything worse than a child's game. He twisted out of the way easily and detached himself from Kisame, making a distance between them. So how is Itachi doing right now? Kakashi was a little bit taken aback by the sudden question coming from the missing nin. But he didn't let that moment get the better of him for long. You don't have to worry about him. He is having a better life in Konoha now, a life where he is happy and doesn't have to worry about the crazy ploy you Akatsuki are planning. Kisame's mouth twisted into a sneer. That traitor should enjoy every last minute he still has. When I finish with you here, his head will be the next one I take. Something in that sentence attracted Kakashi's attention. You seem to hate traitors very much, huh? He noted. Those words seemed to touch Kisame's nerves. That's none of your business, he snarled and leapt at Kakashi. Seimata came down on the Konoha Jonin's head in a deadly arc. But even that couldn't escape the vision of the Sharingan. Kakashi quickly twisted his body out of the way again, and the spiky sword only hit the ground. That's ironic, coming from someone like you, he said while regaining his balance. You hate traitors, and yet you are working with a band full of traitorous bastards who are hell-bent on destroying the world. Do you know how much of a joke it sounds like? Suddenly Kisame's eyes glowered with fury at Kakashi. With a very quick movement, he stabbed Seimata to the desert sand, and his hands started moving through hand seals. Of course, Kakashi's Sharingan caught the movement immediately, and his hands also started blurring through a series of hand seals. Water style. Water. Shark. Bomb. The two shark-shaped water missiles clashed against each other. They snarled and growled and bit each other furiously, before exploding with a deafening bang, showering the two fighters in a rain of tiny droplets. Not even wasting a second, Kisame grabbed the hilt of Samada on the ground and started bombarding Kakashi's head with a furious barrage of slashes. Maybe I went a little bit too far with the provocation, Kakashi thought while desperately dodging the rain of slashes aiming for his head. You seem worried, sensei. Jiraiya noted, looking at the third Hokage, who was walking back and forth around his chamber with clear anxiety on his face. Don't you believe in Naruto and his team? The Toad Sage continued. You have already seen how good Naruto has become during the 3 years training. Even I have to say there is almost nothing which can stop him with his current level of power. And Sasuke was your apprentice. I know, the Hokage nodded grimly. But for some reason, I still can't shake off the feeling that I have overlooked something. We can never be too careful, after all, it is the Akatsuki we're talking about. What the Hokage had just said made Jiraiya think. Usually, his sensei never talked like this. The third Hokage, the legendary professor, overlooking something? Maybe it's just your paranoid instinct, he suggested. You know, powerful or not, this is still the first mission of Naruto as a Jonin. It's understandable if you feel a little bit uneasy about that. Hiruzen grimaced. Hope it is true. The two men looked out of the window. The sun was going to settle below the horizon. After another failed maneuver, Chiyo withdrew her puppets and took a few steps back, making a distance between her and Sasori. It was hard to admit it, but she knew that her grandson had become way more powerful since the day he abandoned the village. Even though his experience in battle couldn't compare to hers, Sasori had definitely surpassed her in puppet-making skill. Just looking at the third Kazekage puppet let her know that for sure. That puppet was more exotic and powerful than any puppet she had ever seen before, including her own Chikamatsu puppet battalion. It wasn't too much to say that it had reached the level of art, as Sasori himself claimed. Only the battle experience she had gathered all her life, accumulated through years of fighting at the front line, could help her survive against the terrifying puppet. Sasori flicked his finger. The cube of black sand changed form again, this time into a humongous spear, and Chiyo's eyes widened. Iron sand, black spear. The unavoidable projectile jutsu of the third. There is no way I can dodge this. She immediately brought her hands together, and 3 of the 10 puppets of Chikamatsu gathered in front of her. God's shield. The 3 puppets quickly formed a triangular formation and extended their arms. In front of them, a great shield made of pure green chakra burst into life right before the black spear made of sand collided against it. A horrible cracking sound echoed through the air. The spear clashed against the shield, obviously trying to pierce through it, but the shield wouldn't budge. Spark flew everywhere, and ear-piercing grinding noise echoed through the air, making even Chiyo herself wince. Cracks started appearing on the surface of the energy shield. Oh, shit. And the shield exploded, not being able to stand the incoming strength of the black spear anymore. But the force of the explosion also managed to shatter the spear back into tiny particles of sand. You managed to make a shield that was able to withstand the unstoppable black spear of the third Kazekage, Sasori said emotionlessly. But let's see if your puppets can survive through this. He flicked his fingers. The sand particles from the destroyed spear gathered up and surged forward, aiming at Chiyo's puppet battalion. On the battlefield, the puppets are like the arms and legs of a puppeteer. If they lose the puppets, there will be nothing that can stop them from being overwhelmed by their enemies. And the iron sand of the third Kazekage was called the Puppet Slayer for that very same reason. Its power can completely stop the functioning of any kind of machinery. If they managed to land on Chiyo's puppets, it would be the end of hers. But the old woman suddenly did something no one could ever expect. Instead of using her puppets to block the incoming black sand wave, she threw herself into the way of the attack. What the? Even Sasori himself couldn't hide the shock upon seeing the sudden movement of his grandmother. The old woman went through a hand seal and raised her right hand. It detached itself from her body and opened up into another chakra shield, and the wave of sand clashed onto it. Very quickly, it started covering the mechanical arm and disabled it, but the other puppets of Chiyo were protected. And Sasori knew he was in trouble when he saw that there were only 9 puppets within his vision. Where is the last one? Chiyo flicked the index finger of her remaining left hand. From underground, right next to Sasori, the last puppet in the 10 puppets of Chikamatsu burst out, its mouth gaping open. Inside, Sasori could see quite clearly the shape of something spherical. Shit. This is the lion closing roar sealing jutsu. If he was caught in the jutsu, he would be finished. Even the most skilled puppeteer needs to maintain his chakra to control the puppets. If his chakra was cut off, his puppet techniques, no matter how skilled he was, would be disabled completely. And he knew that the lion closing roar was designed for that very same purpose, shutting down the chakra in a person's body completely. And it was too near. There's no way he could avoid it. He immediately pulled his hand back, and the puppet of the third Kazekage leapt into the path of the incoming attack and took the jutsu head-on. The lion head crashed against the puppet, crushing it between its giant jaws and cannonballing it away, and immediately, the sealing jutsu came into effect, cutting off the chakra connection between it and Sasori, rendering it useless. Sasori glanced at his puppet, which was now lying on the ground motionlessly. "I can't believe you would risk yourself to disable my favorite puppet like that," he said disdainfully. "But no matter, that's everything you can do. Soon you won't be able to walk again." And Chio knew it was true. Right now, she could feel pain curling through her veins. She kneeled on the ground, breathing heavily. "You put poison in that sand." "Of course," Sasori answered, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Finally got it, eh, grandmother?" Chio gritted her teeth. "I admit. You have surpassed me, Sasori. But without that puppet, you won't be able to do any harm to Sunagakure anymore. That's all I need to know." Answering her was a snort from Sasori. "Oh, please, grandmother, do you really think the third Kazekage is everything I have? He is my favorite, indeed, but he is by no means the only puppet I have. In my hand right now, I have more than enough to crush this village alone if I want." "Really? Then how about you show us what that means?" And Sasori had to jump out of the way when a wave of sand crashed down on where he was standing. He took a glance at the newcomers. "You are the Kazekage. What the hell are Deidara and Kisame doing?" "You don't have to worry about them." Gaara landed on the ground between Chio and the Akatsuki member and threw him a sharp glare. Next to him, Temari and Kankuro were also brandishing their weapons, ready for a fight. "Instead, you should worry about yourself, because you are facing me now." The emotionless cameras which took the shape of eyes bore into Gaara's face. "Then I guess I should stop holding back." He pulled his cloak open, revealing a compartment on his chest. Then he pulled out a scroll from his back. The compartment on his chest snapped open, and from there, strings of chakra burst out and connected with the scroll. A huge burst of smoke, and an army of puppets wearing red cloaks appeared, hovering on the air menacingly above the Sunagakure shinobi. "Let's see what you can do against my performance of 100 puppets." Sasuke narrowed his eyes in concentration while glaring at the 5 clay hawks coming at him. Those birds were smaller than the dragon Deidara was riding on, but their speed was far superior. And with the small size, they were way more flexible and dangerous in a dogfight, especially when they already managed to outnumber the enemy. And one more thing that made them dangerous was that they can explode upon contact. Even the slightest mistake would mark the Uchiha's doom. But Sasuke knew he didn't have anything to worry about. He already had the most powerful and suitable partner for a situation like this with him. Garuda was not as fast as Ulki or Janef. But he didn't need to be. Different from the 2 other hawks, he was something people called a battle hawk. A hawk specializing in airborne fighting. He had the ability to perform very difficult, to the point of reckless, maneuvers on the air, allowing him to get through formations which seemed to be unable to break through. And with Sasuke's projectile attacks, he would also have the mean to fight enemies from a distance. If Deidara Dragon could be considered a tactical bomber designed to bombard structures, then Garuda would be a jet fighter designed for air supremacy. And that's the reason why Sasuke knew he would win in this battle. From the other side, the Clay Hawks began their assault. 2 of them separated from the formation and rushed the Uchiha and his ride, their wings cut through the air, making a rather ear-piercing shrill. But Sasuke was ready. "Let's do it just like we practiced, Garuda. On it, Sasuke-sama." The hawk spread his wings and, with a movement Deidara couldn't expect, charged right at the incoming Clay Hawks. "So you want to die, eh Uchiha? Then I will give it to you." But right before the 3 hawks could collide with each other, Garuda suddenly stopped in midair and took an unexpected dive to the ground. The 2 Clay Hawks, unable to respond to such a reckless and out-of-the-box maneuver, couldn't halt their advance in time and as such, collided with each other and exploded violently in midair without even being able to harm a strand of hair on Sasuke's head. "TSK. Deidara clicked his tongue in annoyance. He made a hand seal, and the 3rd hawk advanced. It exploded into tens of smaller birds, which proceeded to swarm Sasuke's vision, blocking the two larger ones from his view. The Uchiha's brain flashed. Time to bring out the big gun. He raised his bow and pulled the string. Ready to fire. Take Mikazuchi. Affirmative. Load cartridge. Combination successful. Plasma style. Penetrating arrow. The orb on the bow glowed brightly, and from Sasuke's fingertips, a blue arrow made of pure chakra started forming and lengthened towards the incoming rain of clay birds. Upon reaching the orb, the arrow started glowing brighter and brighter with more chakra pumping into it. The rain of clay birds was coming closer and closer. And Sasuke let go of his hand. The arrow made of pure plasma tore through the flock of clay birds, burning them to bits as if they weren't there, leaving only a trail of dust on its way. And it didn't even stop there, it continued its way towards the two remaining clay hawks, forcing them to dodge frantically to the sides to avoid being turned to dust. Without anything on its way, the arrow soared towards Deidara, whose eyes widened, and he desperately forced the clay dragon to plunge downward, but even that couldn't help a large part of its tail being cut off, robbing Deidara the only source of ammo he had left. And even after that, the arrow still didn't stop, it continued gaining altitude, until disappearing as a dot of light in the sky. "Oh dear Mother of God!" Those were the only words Deidara could utter upon seeing the destructive attack. He made a hasty hand seal, and the two remaining hawks veered back into the way, but this time he could not afford to attack recklessly like before. This time, one of the hawks rushed forward, and just like before, Sasuke and Garuda avoided the advance easily. But unlike before, it stopped mid-air and turned back, still following the two doggedly. TSK. Knowing that it would be troublesome if he could not take the clay creation down, Sasuke turned back and shot another arrow at it. But it seemed this time Deidara already prepared for it. He formed another hand seal, and the clay hawk made an impressive dodge roll in midair, and the plasma arrow soared harmlessly past it. Immediately, the attacking clay creation regained its balance and continued tailing Sasuke and Garuda. Sasuke gritted his teeth. It seemed the Akatsuki member had recognized that a one-on-one fight was the most suitable against someone as skilled in airborne battles as the Uchiha, and now he was abusing that advantage as much as he could. If that's the case, the only way I can take down both of those annoying birds is... Under Sasuke's command, Garuda suddenly turned and rushed towards the other clay hawk. So he wants to take out my last two creations just like before. But do you really think I'm that much of a fool? Very well, if that's the case, I will take your bait. And the remaining hawk also plunged itself towards Sasuke and Garuda. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. His muscles tightened. He took the bait. The two hawks, one real, one made of clay, were getting closer and closer. Almost there. Then Deidara's mouth twisted into a nasty grin. Boom. Before the two hawks could even collide, the clay hawk had exploded into a thick cloud of smoke. The explosion didn't cause any damage, but it managed to engulf Sasuke and his hawk in the smoke cloud, and even with the Sharingan, he couldn't see through all the smoke around him. Basically, he lost all his vision. And the last clay hawk, which was tailing Sasuke and Garuda doggedly, charged right into the cloud of smoke. And it's over for the mighty Uchiha Thunderbird, Deidara smirked. But then he was completely shocked when no explosion came. What? Deidara, missing Namikaze, used to be a member of the Explosion Corp. From inside the cloud of smoke, the voice of the Uchiha rose. Do you really think we came here without preparing anything? The smoke cloud cleared, and Deidara's eyes widened. The last clay hawk, which should have exploded, was skewered from every direction with spears made of lightning chakra. Your bombs are made by infusing an earth-based jutsu into clay, then molding it into different shapes, the Uchiha continued. And everyone knows what earth chakra is weak against. Unfortunately for you, my main element is lightning. Deidara gritted his teeth. So that's the reason why that Cyclops pointed him at me. Not only because he could fly, but also because he had the very same element which could stop all my attacks. Blood-red eyes stared into Deidara's own eyes, and his blood boiled. Those accursed eyes. Genjutsu. No way. Since when? Right from the beginning, when you saw Itachi's Sharingan, you were already under his Genjutsu. Deidara squinted. The figure which was emerging from the sunlight just stood there, mocking him with his existence. His blood-red eyes bore into his face, even though they showed no expression. Deidara still felt like hundreds of tiny insects were crawling up his legs, his spine, all over his body. This is true art. You. Son of a by 5'5". Sasuke raised an eyebrow. Can't believe he snapped so easily, he mumbled. I'm better than them. Deidara continued ranting, a little bit crazily now. There is no way. There is no way I'm going to lose to those eyes, again. He rammed his hand into the dragon he was riding, and pulled out a handful of clay from it. Behold! The art I developed just to take down all bearers of those accursed eyes. The art of C4. But before he could even do anything with the clay, both he and the dragon were sucked into a wormhole and disappeared from the sky. What the? Sasuke's eyes widened in shock. Where did he go? Kakashi nimbly dodged to a side, avoiding another deadly slash coming down on his head from Kisame. He did a quick thinking. His white light chakra saber, fixed and reinforced as it was, still could no way compare to the giant Saimata on Kisame's hands. If he abused it too much, his sword would be the one that broke down under the pressure first. And Kisame wasn't named one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist for nothing. His sword was huge, but the way he wielded it was just like it weighed nothing. Kakashi had never fought the rogue swordsman before, but from what he had heard, it seemed during the time he had served in Kagekoura's shinobi force, he had never failed to acquire his target even once. And in this battle, he could say that the rumors about his opponent weren't hoaxes. And there was another problem. In a sword fight of 2 swordsmen with the same level of skill, the one with the longer sword would have a big advantage. They could cover a larger range than the one with the shorter sword, making it incredibly hard for the enemy to come close enough to strike. Kakashi's sword was a tanto, meaning that he would have to come very close to Kisame in order to deliver his attacks, but unfortunately for him, the ex-Kari ninja's sword was much longer and bigger, and his stance left almost no opening. Even worse, with the chakra-absorbing ability of the sword, he could stop any long-range jutsu. It was safe to say that, with Saimata on his hand, Kisame was a perfect ninja in terms of both offense and defense. It meant he would have to separate Kisame and the sword first. Or, he had to, somehow, bypass the protection of the sword and strike him from behind without his enemy being able to retaliate. It seems this is when I have to use my new jutsu. His left hand reached into the pouch on his belt. This might cost me a lot of chakra. So I only have one shot at it. Have to plan the attack as carefully as possible. Then without warning, he kicked the ground and launched himself towards Kisame. His sword swept an arc across the air, aiming at Kisame's neck. But just like before, the Akatsuki member easily stopped the slash with his giant sword. Using the momentum of the slash, Kakashi made a backflip before delivering a kick at Kisame's side. The ex-Kari missing nin's eyes widened when he realized that Kakashi's foot was being coated in lightning chakra. So you want to play like that, huh? Kisame immediately twisted his body out of the way, and Kakashi's kick only managed to nick his black coat a bit. He immediately retaliated by brutally bashing the Konoha Jonin away with his sword. But Kakashi's Sharingan caught the action almost immediately. He spun on the air, and using the huge sword as a kicking board, he launched himself away from Kisame. Only now did he pull his hand out of the pouch on his belt. Coating them in lightning, he tossed the handful of kunai he was holding at Kisame. The knives soared through the air. No, it's better explained that with the lightning chakra covering them, they managed to pierce through the friction of the air and fly at the Akatsuki member at a deadly speed, letting out disturbing noises as if thousands of birds were chirping at the same time. But Kisame wasn't worried. Things like this, he could just use Saimata to block. The chakra would be absorbed by the sword anyway, and with the hard and sharp scales on the blade, the kunai would just bounce off without even harming it. But to his surprise and shock, before the kunai could even touch the blade, they had all disappeared. No. More like they twisted themselves out of his vision, because he definitely saw them twisting in the air. What the hell? But he had no time to pay attention to those disappearing kunai, because right behind that rain of throwing knives was Kakashi, who once again clashed sword with him. And Kisame was surprised when he felt that the force the other Jonin was putting on his right arm right now was much stronger than before. And on Kakashi's left hand, a Chidori was sparking furiously. So you want to get close to me to strike me with that, huh? Kisame grunted when 1,000 volts of electricity was shoved into his body when Kakashi rammed the Chidori into his stomach. But this was nothing. In this close range, the piercing power of the technique was reduced considerably, and years of fighting Kumo Shinobi had given his skin good resistance to electricity. Things like this couldn't even compare. Kakashi's face couldn't be seen under his mask. But if anyone could see through it, they would see a victorious smile. How did you? Kisame gasped out in pain, obviously from the 7 kunai that were sticking out of his back. With the kunai piercing through his skin, lightning chakra was flowing into his body from them, effectively numbing down all of his senses. Where did those kunai come from? Kakashi's eyes twinkled. Do you remember the kunai I threw earlier? And Kisame's eyes widened when his eyes caught sight of Kakashi's Sharingan. It now had the shape of a pinwheel. He gritted his teeth. You teleported them behind me. Actually, it's a little bit more complicated than that, Kakashi chuckled, but I'm not planning to let you know everything about it. Secret is an important part of a ninja, am I right? He pulled his hand away, and Kisame slumped down to his knee. You fought well, monster of the hidden mist. But I'm afraid this is the end of you. Kakashi raised his sword, preparing to deliver the final blow. Before he was kicked brutally from the side. His body was flung away, crashing into the ground painfully. What the hell? Hey! You're finally here, huh? Kisame grinned, his face twisted a bit in pain. Kakashi immediately flipped himself back up from the ground. And his eyes widened. You. Gaara glared at the horde of puppets hovering in front of him wearily. No, it's not that he was afraid. Gaara never feared battling. But even so, he had never had to face a whole army before. But he didn't have anything to worry about. The chakra Naruto gave him was so powerful, with it inside his chakra coil, he knew there was absolutely nothing that could get past him. So you prefer that fox over me, huh? Gaara smiled when he heard Shukaku's voice in his head. So are you already up? I didn't think you could wake up so quickly. Thanks for helping me with that dome, by the way. You are awesome. Shukaku huffed inside Gaara's mind. Ha. Of course I'm awesome. And yet you dare go and use that fox's chakra without my permission. Gaara chuckled. Oh, so the great Shukaku is jealous of her sister, huh? Cue Shukaku being reduced to a stuttering mess. Humph. Then don't even come to me asking for protection the next time, you idiot. I don't have spare chakra to protect you anyway. Then the connection between them was cut off abruptly. But Gaara smiled. Yeah, Shukaku. We already completed our duty to protect the village. This is now the time for me to use my own strength to protect you. Kankuro, Tamari. Bring Lady Chiyo to Sakura Haruno, who is now staying at the edge of the village. She will know how to help her. No way, Kankuro immediately retorted. There is no way we're leaving you alone with that bastard. Then he pulled out a Sira again, ready to charge into battle. Listen to me, Kankuro. Kankuro was stunned a bit when he heard the calm voice coming from Gaara. You don't need to worry about me. Lady Chiyo is the one who needs help right now, not me. Besides, I want you to go because this place is going to get a little bit messy. Kankuro opened his mouth, but hesitated when he saw the confident look and the slight smirk on his brother's face. Finally, he nodded, then together with his sister, he lifted the old woman up, ready to depart. But Sasori wasn't going to let them go that easily. The army of puppets rose to the air, and upon the puppeteer's command, started bombarding the four shinobi with the largest train of poisonous senbone Kankuro had ever seen. Oh shit. However, the senbone couldn't even land on them. Thousands of senbone made of sand surged out from the ground and launched themselves toward the steel senbone, intercepting them right on their way. None of the poisonous senbone could pass through the barrage of sand senbone. Taking this chance, Kankuro and Tamari, carrying Lady Chiyo, immediately ran like hell away from the fight, towards the border of the village, where Sakura and Naruto were waiting. Sasori's eyes narrowed. You. If that's really the only thing you can do to kill us, then it's pathetic, Gaara said calmly, lowering his hand, which he had raised in front of him to summon his barrage of sand senbone to counter Sasori's attack. And he added in a mocking tone, even drawling his voice deliberately. Even Kankuro could do it better than you. Sasori's puppet body couldn't express emotions. Hell, even his real body right now was just a blob of flesh, no more, no less. There was no way it could feel emotions anymore. But right now, for some reason, Gaara could feel something similar to a clear, utter rage coming from it. I am going to bind your insolent mouth up, brat. Then the army of puppets surged towards the young Kazekage. Sand tendrils immediately shot out from the ground, meeting the wave of puppets in mid-air. Useless. Upon Sasori's word, the front line of the puppet army immediately formed a wall, shielding the rest of the puppet army from the deadly tsunami of sand tendrils. And upon touching the wall, the tendrils disintegrated back into sand particles. So they can absorb the chakra from my jutsu. Just like that sword. The wave of puppets continued rushing ahead, towards Gaara, with the clear intention of burying him with their sheer number. Humph. Suddenly Gaara made a movement Sasori couldn't expect. With an extravagant motion, he pulled his hand back into a fist and threw his right palm forward. What? To the puppeteer's shock, the first line of puppets, the one shielding his other puppets from Gaara's jutsu, was blasted away seemingly by the sheer wind pressure coming from the palm thrust. At least 15 of them exploded into smithereens, and the other ones were crippled so badly they fell to the ground, not being able to move anymore even under Sasori's control. The puppet army immediately halted its way and retreated back to Sasori. The Akatsuki member himself didn't dare attack recklessly anymore, now that his defensive method was broken so easily. How did you? My puppets should have been able to absorb that attack. A victorious smirk bloomed on Gaara's face. Oh, it's natural that your puppets couldn't absorb that. After all, that move, it wasn't ninjutsu. What? You know what? I think it's time for you to try finding a way to fight without using my ability. Gaara was surprised to hear what Shukaku had just said. Why, Shukaku? Are you worried about not being able to protect me? He teased, and naturally, the tailed beast snapped back at him in an irritated and embarrassed tone. Go to hell. What I'm saying is, the enemy most likely already knew about what you can do if what they're aiming for is to capture you to pull me out of your body. And your specialty is ninjutsu, so naturally they would find a way to disable it, such as disrupting the flow of chakra in the jutsu. And since my specialty is ninjutsu also, I can't do anything if that happens. Gaara pondered. What Shukaku had just said actually made sense. So, you think I should try taijutsu? That way of fighting doesn't require me to use chakra. That might be the case. But like how I'm going to let my Jinchuriki fight like those brutes in Kumagakure, or those two weirdos in Konoha. If you can't find a way to fight both gracefully and powerfully, then nope. Gaara deadpanned. You asked for too much already, you know. But that also made him think. He also knew that he could never reach the level of the two infamous taijutsu specialists of Konoha in terms of muscle power. And he shuddered when thinking of the Raikage. Those muscles. He would need to find a way to utilize what he already had, and at the same time, not depend too much on chakra. A taijutsu style which didn't depend too much on muscles, but still had the necessary destructive capabilities. A style in which he could utilize the skills he already had. Then an idea hit him. Maybe that could work. I used to be a one-trick pony, only depending on my tailed beast's power to overcome my enemies through force, Gaara continued. But after I became Kazekage, I knew that depending on Shukaku's power alone wouldn't help me protect my village, protecting the ones I love. So. He smiled triumphantly, you are going to face the wrath of my own brand of taijutsu, the Divine Wind Bomb. Taijutsu? The Kazekage, using taijutsu? I've never heard about this. Then Sasori saw Gaara's palm, and realized it. Air was gathering around his palm, swirling like a tornado in it, so much that he could clearly see it even with naked eyes. Or rather, with the camera he set in his puppet body's eye sockets. It was that very same air, being compressed into the Kazekage's palm and released in an instant, not chakra, that tore his puppet army apart. Gaara's body rose up from the ground. Sand twisted around him, forming limbs hovering above his head menacingly. Now, are you going to surrender, or do I have to destroy your puppets one by one? Sasori looked at the looming Gaara warily. This was, by no means, everything he had, but he would rather not go all out right now. No, not when his mission was only right at that time. Sasori suddenly looked up. Then in a movement Gaara couldn't expect, he dispelled all of his summoned puppets. What is that? Gaara glared at the Akatsuki member in suspicion. Are you going to surrender? Sasori snorted. I don't have the time to stay here playing ninja with you, little Kazekage. My mission is over, and there is no point in wasting energy here. After all, leader might have been done with what he's planning to do. Then he flipped open his cloak. On his body, a contraption snapped open and from inside, a small thing shot out towards Gaara. The Kazekage's eyes widened, and a wall of sand snapped up from the ground, shielding him right before the object could land on him, and it was incredibly lucky for himself that he did that, because right upon contact, the object exploded with a force that managed to sweep away even Gaara's shield of sand. What the? When the smoke and fire cleared away, Sasori was nowhere to be seen. That's strange. Naruto blinked when he heard Juki's voice in his head. What's wrong? In the letter they sent to Konoha, it said the enemy army had at least 10,000 troops. But right now, their number, while still very large, couldn't reach even a half of that number. How could it be? Juki's right, Goku agreed. I've seen battles with armies of that scale before, this couldn't be half of that number. It's easy to understand, because this is actually just half of their army. Everyone turned to Kurama. What do you mean, Kurama? Naruto asked in surprise. I can sense the emotion of a huge number of individuals about 10 kilometers away from the village, the fox answered. And they are on their way to the village right as we're talking. Although, I can't say that it is emotions I felt, it's more like instinct. They are just like animals which the only mindset was to fight to the death. They are definitely under the control of someone. Then she frowned. That's weird. They stopped moving. And it seemed they have just disappeared altogether. How is that possible? Are they retreating? That's even stranger, Muratabi noted. If they wanted to level Sunagakure to the ground like we thought, why didn't they just bring all their force to the battle? If they had done that, the battle would have ended even before we arrived here. Kokuo Niikan? Chome looked at the five-tail horse. Usually you would be the one saying something about this. You're the smart one, not us. The horse closed his eyes. Actually, I have noticed that for a while. But I still can't understand why they would do it. After all, it's just like Muratabi said, they could have finished the battle long before we could arrive here. Then his eyes snapped open in horror. Unless. You know, Jiraiya, I can't shake off the feeling that we're forgetting something very important. The Toad Sage turned to the Hokage with a confused look. What's wrong, Sensei? We already sent our best team to support Sunagakure in their war effort. You know that Naruto alone can be an army by himself, right? And we also have Kakashi, Sakura and Sasuke with him. From Naruto's exam, I already knew what they can do. Hiruzen bit his lips. No. What I'm worried about is not Naruto. You know that if wanting to capture someone important like a Jinchuriki, usually people would go for a secret kidnapping rather than an all-out total war like this, right? Especially a small, terrorist organization like the Akatsuki. They have S-rank missing nin who can do the kidnapping quite easily and discreetly. And yet, they sent 3 of them, meaning half of their force, together with 10,000 troops. Why wasting all those manpower to go for a war they know they cannot win without losing a lot themselves? Those words made Jiraiya startle. You're right. Causing such a great war isn't Nagato's style at all. Do you think this is just a distraction? The Hokage nodded grimly. That is definitely a possibility. They might be trying to get our most powerful shinobi out of the village in order to deliver a sneak attack at us. Remember, now Naruto is not the only Jinchuriki in our possession, after all. I see, Jiraiya nodded. Then we'd better get our shinobi ready for defense. There's no way we can know when they will attack. Actually, there is another possibility, Hokage-sama. The 2 shinobi looked at the entrance to the Hokage chamber. Shikaku Nara was standing there, his face grim. I'm sorry for eavesdropping on your conversation. He walked into the room and closed the door behind him. But even though they managed to get our 4 most powerful jonin out of the village, I doubt they would dare to attack us at this moment. We have 2 of the legendary Sannin together with a Jinchuriki with perfect control over her tailed beast within the village right now, and you're said to be the most powerful of the current 5 Kage. If I were the leader of the Akatsuki, I wouldn't attack the village right now. Not until I already had a few tailed beasts in my possession. Hiruzen's face tightened. So you mean? Shikaku nodded. Yes. They might be aiming for our allies, in order to not only get their Jinchuriki, but also weaken our alliance. Both of Kakashi's eyes locked at the newcomer. This was the first time he met this individual face to face. But everything behind that mask, he had already known, thanks to a certain blonde who traveled back in time. He just didn't want to admit that it was his old friend who was standing in front of him, being the mastermind behind everything which had happened in his life. He raised his sword and pointed it at the masked figure. Who are you, and why are you interrupting our fight? Chuckles rose from behind the mask, and Kakashi had to do everything he could to keep himself from shivering. Kakashi Hitake, hero of the Sharingan. What my name is isn't important. Right now, you can just call me Toby. Toby. Obito. So you're going around with that name now, huh? Toby, Bito, whatever, Kakashi growled. If you don't get out of the way, you'll be the next one who falls under this blade. He was sure he saw a slight, but sudden movement on Toby's left arm when he heard that name coming out of his mouth. However, that moment passed as fast as it came, and Toby answered him in a mocking tone. Such a big word, Kakashi Hitake. You really think you can touch me with that? Anyway, I cannot let you kill Kisame today. He is still useful for us, the Akatsuki. From the ground, Kisame grinned, despite being in pain. So leader has finished his work, huh? Yeah, Toby answered curtly. And that means your work is also done. It's time for us to retreat. Good job buying us time, there won't be anything they can do for Karagakure now, anyway. He grabbed Kisame's hand, and before Kakashi could even do anything, the 2 Akatsuki members disappeared in a spiral vortex. What? At Karagakure. The whole village was completely devastated. No one had expected the sudden attack without even a warning, And definitely no one could have expected that a group of 3 shinobi could do something like this to a great hidden village. Had it not been for Utakata's last-ditch effort to defend the village against the final blow coming from the attackers, everything in Karagakure would have been flattened by now. What the hell are you? Zabuza gritted his teeth while leaning on his Kubi Karabocho as a crutch. Even with the newly formed 7 swordsmen wielding 4 of the legendary swords, they had stood no chance against the enemies from the Akatsuki. The leading attacker raised his hand, and the devil of the hidden mist was thrown backward by an invisible force. 3 pairs of violet rippled eyes stared down the scene of devastation. Consider this a warning to anyone who dares raise a hand to defy us. We are pain, and we are God. Anyone defying God's will suffer the same consequence. That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.